Okay, folks, good morning. Welcome to Irwindale. Ow! Thank you all for getting up early and making the trek out here. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to Biomimicry 2016, The Road to Resiliency. Pretty cool, right? It's really exciting to me that there's so many people here in the room excited about biomimicry this morning. It's great. We are going to start the day with a safety message from our venue host here at Southern California Edison. I want to extend a big thank you to all the people here who have helped us with this event, including Amanda Reyes and Roger and the entire Southern California Edison team. We're so thankful to partner with SCE on our events. And please take a moment to check out the facility while you're here. There's a lot of great educational resources, and SCE has an exhibitor booth out in the hall as well. So please welcome Corey Myers with SCE for a safety message.
Thanks, Drew, and folks, welcome again. We appreciate that you're here. I'd like to do a real quick safety moment, and that would be in the event of an earthquake. You want to duck, but there's nothing to cover under, so shelter in place quickly. The doors to exit are right here at the back of the room. Those are actually two doors. The one on the left is a larger glass panel. Both of them are doors, and they push out. So because of the number of occupants that we have in here, I just want to make sure that you can get out safely if there is an event. If if a fire extinguisher is needed, it's in this back corner. Angela, raise your hand. The fire extinguisher is located there. If there is a 911 event, please call 911 on your cell phone, but please ensure that somebody walks to the front counter so we can escort them in. This is a workforce and education training facility, 51,000 square feet of public access property. We encourage you to walk around. As Drew said, stop into some of the meeting rooms, and hope we get to see you again. Thank you.
Got to lower the mic here. I'm not quite as tall as Corey. Thank you, Corey. So next up, I'd like to give recognition to our sponsors for today's event, and I've got some other announcements as well, where we have a lot of great speakers today who have an incredible amount of educational content to share. So I'm going to try to push through all these announcements as fast as I can, so forgive me if I'm speaking a little quickly. But just a quick thank you to our sponsors, who this event would not be possible without. All of our partners listed here, International Living Future Institute, the LA Clean Tech Incubator, Biomimicry LA, Living Building Challenge Los Angeles Collaborative, 2030 District in LA, a new USGBC-LA, AIA LA. Many of them have tables out in the exhibitor hall, so please check them out. Our two media sponsors, Building Green and Green Building and Design Magazine. And then, big thank you to our exhibitor sponsors, Havelock Wool, Panco, Glumac, and Bentley, and our venue host, of course, Southern California Edison, and again, our event level sponsor, Interface. Ken Rickman is here today. Ken, can you raise your hand if you're out there? Here's Ken. Big thank you for Ken. Can we get a big round of applause for Interface for coming through on this? We also have Mikhail Davis from Interface, who will be one of our speakers later this morning as well. Note on continuing education units, CEUs. This conference today has been approved for AIA CEUs. If you want to sign up for those, go out to the AIA table and write your name down, and they'll report those for you for 3 units. Same thing for Living Future hours, LFA. Those are self-reporting, though, so feel free to report those on your own. We submitted for GBCI hours, but for some reason there's been a delay. Usually takes a couple days, and it's been a couple weeks. So we don't have the approved number yet, but we do expect to get that. We'll send a follow-up email after the event to all the attendees with that course number so you guys can do your self-reporting for your GBCI hours as well. Just a note on the format today. We're going to hold all the questions until the end. We'll have all the speakers return to the stage. All 10 speakers will come up. We'll get these other chairs up here as well. And we'll have all the questions in the last session, the last 20 minutes, and we'll have some dialogue that happens. So please save your questions, write them down on your phone, and we'll do that at the end. There is some overflow seating in the neighboring room, and they have the video feed and sound in there. If you're in that other room, feel free to walk over to ask a question. There's a microphone in the back of this room. Okay, quick interactive activity for everybody. Please reach into your pocket or your purse and pull out your cell phone for me. Everybody grab your cell phones. Okay, now take a picture of your neighbor or a selfie even, whatever you want to do. Open up your Twitter and Facebook apps, and we are going to try to get this trending a little bit today, at least for our group, and sort of spread the word on social media as well for what we're all here for today, what we're passionate about, trying to build momentum around biomimicry. So use this hashtag for all of your posts. Tag speakers, firms, and your firms, and tag at Verdical Group as well throughout the day. Why don't you like our Facebook and Twitter pages while you're at it? Just a couple quick metrics. 250 people registered today, and the flyer that we sent around through various email lists hit over 100,000 eyeballs. So we've had a lot of good momentum around today's event. Wanted to introduce who we are a little bit at Verdical Group, full-service green building consulting company, focusing on lead commissioning, energy modeling, program management, and events like today's event. Part of what we do is just focusing on inspiration and trying to change the market, envision, create, sustain, imagine tomorrow with us. We're glad to share biomimicry with this group and have all you guys help to spread this message at your offices after we leave today. Again, a little bit on our services. We're also a 1% for the Planet member company. Check this out if you haven't, and see if your company can do it as well. We try to walk the talk, and we give 1% of our revenue, not just profit, to environmental organizations. A couple of our clients, many of you are here today, and a quick snapshot of our team. I just wanted to extend some thank yous to folks on our team who made today possible. Emily Hand and Brittany Salisbury contributed a ton, but a big thank you to Sophia Siegel, who is the main point of contact for today's event, who really brought this from an idea to everything that we've put together today. So if I could get a quick round of applause for Sophia. Thank you. And if you see her in the hallways, give her a big high five. She deserves it. Thank you, Sophia. So I just have a couple slides to share. This is me when I was a kid, growing up in Maine. A lot of people's stories about biomimicry and their connection to the environment go back to where they grew up. And kind of my theme for today is that just how important it is to actually you have to spend time outside in nature in order to pick that up. And it can be hard for people in the city to do that. But yeah, I mean, I grew up in Maine, 40 acres of land, middle of nowhere, and I was running around outside all day, every day. So just nature is kind of in my DNA, in my thinking. It's the lens through which I approach any design problem. I try to get this little, there we go, get that thing to go away. But yeah, I mean, you see people in suits, don't always assume where their head is at. This is how I think about things, and we brought that to our Verdical Group team as well here in LA. We spend a lot of time talking about biomimicry and how it influences our thinking. We take time every couple months to get out and do a hike together and spend time outside. And so if you're interested in getting paid to hike, we're hiring a senior project manager right now. But I'm going to go through just a quick series of slides. A couple of our friends that we saw on our last hike on the right side here. But it's just amazing how much you can learn from nature if you take the time to look. How does nature handle beauty? Again, I'm going to get like 10 pictures. These are slides from one hike we did a couple weeks ago. And yes, all these were shot on an iPhone 6. But, how does nature handle beauty? I mean, man, there's just beautiful, beautiful wildflowers that we saw on our hike. How does nature handle energy and harvesting energy from the sun, renewable energy? How can we apply all these lessons to our buildings? How does nature do seismic support and stability? I mean, look at a tree's roots and its ability to sway in the wind but not break. Biophilia. It's interesting to me when you think about nature-related to biophilia, because nature doesn't need to think about biophilia. Biophilia is people's connection to nature, and if our buildings really embodied bringing living systems into the building, we wouldn't need to be talking about biophilia anymore. So if we all do better at our jobs, we won't have to even have this term. How does nature handle building envelope? Think about a tree's bark. In Ilaria today, one of our speakers is going to be speaking about envelope. How does nature handle water? I'm just thinking about efficiency, symbiosis. These are like termite trails through a log, and organisms kind of contributing to one another. And then resiliency. This is a tree that's growing on a rock in a drought-afflicted Southern California climate, and it's still alive and hanging in there. And yep, that's poop. How do we handle waste? Sophia was making fun of me yesterday. She just thought I was so proud of myself for getting poop into the presentation. But on a serious note, nature's all closed-loop systems, right? There's no waste treatment facility. It just goes back into the loop, and that's what we need to strive for. So in closing, let me find where I am on my notes here that I haven't been looking at. Just a quick quote from the beat poet Gary Snyder: "Nature's not a place you visit; it's home." And I don't know if you haven't heard that quote before. Just kind of think about it for a minute. Before there was the mall and the freeway and the city and in and out, it was just nature. That's our real natural environment. And for all of us urbanite city dwellers, it's easy to forget that. And even for me, I'm passionate about this stuff, and I'm lucky if I get out with my kids to hike, every couple weeks, maybe once a month sometimes. So it's really important for all of us to remember that and spend as much time as we can outside to learn from nature and study it and share that with our kids, and use that as inspiration. And that's what today's all about. Brings us to today, Biomimicry 2016. So how about another big round of applause for all you for being here today. So here are our guides through this educational journey, our speakers for today. Really excited about these folks. People have flown in from all over the country: New York City, Seattle, San Francisco, Portland, Montana. Really, really great group of thought-leading speakers. I am super excited to hear all their presentations myself. So looking forward to today. So next up, I am going to introduce Holly Hill and Hillary Firestone. Holly's with Verdical Group. Hillary's with the City of LA. Here they are. Come on up, guys. And they are going to do a quick announcement about Greenbuild coming to LA this October.
How do we present after poop? Resource recovery, Hillary. Welcome, everybody. We wanted to introduce ourselves. Again, I'm Holly Hill, co-chair of the Ambassadors Committee for Greenbuild 2016. And I am Hillary Firestone, Holly's co-chair, also for the Ambassadors Committee. So, as some of you might already know, Greenbuild, which is our annual International Green Building Conference, is coming to Los Angeles this year. And it's going to be in downtown LA from October 4th through 7th. And we want you all to be a part of it. Hang out with your closest 20 to 30,000 green building friends. We have 7 committees that are currently spearheading initiatives and to get us all involved and engaged. There's ambassadors, ourselves, volunteers, momentum, legacy, tours, greening partnerships. So whatever your network is, whoever your clients are, we're sure you can help. Excuse me. we're sure you can participate and be a part of all that's coming forth down in 2016.
So one of the first ways you can get involved is starting next week. We have one of our Road to Green Build events on March 17th, a green drinks mixer, where we'll be announcing the legacy project. So something new that USGBC started a few years ago is the host city gets to create a project that they leave behind for the city to enjoy for years to come. And we're going to be unveiling our legacy project next week. And I saw Maya here earlier. She's the co-chair for the legacy project. So I hope you all can come next week. It's going to be in downtown LA. And then following that, our next Road to Green Build event is going to be a conference similar to this at another energy resource center. SoCalGas in Downey is hosting the 15th annual Municipal Green Building Conference, our own mini version of Green Build locally here for LA, and that's going to be on April 21st. So a great way to get excited, mingle and network with the people here in LA and learn more interesting things. So
yeah, so please visit the chapter website, usgbc.org, and there's information about Green Build, the different committees you can participate on, the Legacy Project, our events. There's a plethora of information. So please visit it, and we hope to see your faces at all of our events this year.
And I'll plug another hashtag and Twitter. Outside in the lobby by the tables, there's a nice banner that talks about has a picture of Green Build, and this year's theme is Iconic Green. So feel free to take a selfie in front of it, hashtag Green Build, to get excited for people coming to LA this fall. So thank you.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Holly and Hillary. Great to have you guys here. I'm so excited about Green Build coming to LA. Green Build's been going for 14 years, I believe, and it's the first time in LA. I'm also on the host committee and really looking forward to that in October. Next up, we have a quick introduction of the Living Building Challenge Los Angeles Collaborative by our co-facilitators here in LA, Justin DePaolo with Glumac and Jesse Buckmaster with Hathaway Dinwiddie.
Hey friends, nice to see all of your faces. Thanks for coming out this morning, and thank you, Drew. Cool. So my name is Justin.
I'm Jesse Buckmaster.
And we are the new co-facilitators of the Living Building Challenge Los Angeles Collaborative. And we are so happy to have the captain of our glorious ship, Amanda Sturgeon, here. And you're going to be seeing her awesome face later and hearing what she has to say. We're really excited for that. Thank you for, she actually bike rode the entire way down here. So, no, I'm joking. We have an amazing team, and most of you are in the audience today, including Drew. He gave us 3 minutes to speak about the Living Building Challenge, so I'm going to go on a 20-minute lecture instead. No, but the connection I do want to make, if you don't know what the LBC does, we don't have a table outside. We're going to be floating tables. Come speak to us, and we can give you information. We host monthly events that Jesse's going to go into in a second here. But what I do want to say, the connection that we do have is, and some of you have heard me say this before, we are the only things on this planet that creates waste. Nature does not create waste. So this event and the field that is biomimicry and biophilia that brings us together today, it only exists because we have to figure out how to be more like nature. And that's our connection. And so Jesse's going to go over some of our teammates. And
so our collaborative is only as strong as our volunteers. And so we have a really, really committed steering committee that we've broken up into subcommittees to help us manage different topics. So as you can see on our list, we've got energy, water, materials, communications policy in place. And these are the people that really put together our monthly meetings. We meet on the second Wednesday of every month somewhere in the Southern California area, and each meeting is focused on a different topic, which we'll go into in a little. You can kind of see our plan for the year. But our steering committee are really what make things happen. And if any of these topics are interesting to you, you want to get more involved, please reach out to us. We'd love to have you participate.
And then really quick shout outs to the new Orange County collaborative. Kevin, can Kevin stand up? If you have any questions, if you live in Orange County in the Irvine area, they have a brand new awesome collaborative down there, and so you don't have to travel all the way to Los Angeles, even though we do want you with us. We can share you with OC. And then also San Diego as well. And we have this year is going to be our focus of collaborating with the collaborative. So we're going to be working together with the southern region to make sure that we're doing the best job to communicate and educate and inspire in the southern region.
So here's just a quick overview of our calendar. You can see this year our big focus is looking at how all these different topics of water and energy, that they're really interrelated and connected, and starting to take those ideas and talk about the tools of how to actually implement them. We want to make these real for our area. And so if any of these topics, again, are interesting to you, hopefully we'll see you at all of them. But here's kind of the breakdown. Send us an email. We will get you on our mailing list, and you'll get the invites to these future events. So we just want to thank you and hope to see you at one of our events in the future.
Thanks, guys.
Great. Thank you, Justin and Jesse. Appreciate you guys being here. So it's time to get into the meat of today's conference, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Amanda Sturgeon, CEO of the International Living Future Institute, as our keynote speaker today. Amanda has been honored with both a FAIA and LEED Fellow designation. She's been with ILFI for 5 years, formerly overseeing programs, and then as executive director, and currently as a CEO. She's also a founding board member of the Cascadia Green Building Council, and worked at Perkins Will for many years on their sustainable design program. And she was named one of the top 10 most powerful women in sustainability in 2015 as a recipient of the Women in Sustainability Leadership Award. She's here all the way from Seattle, and we're very happy to be also partnering with ILFI. Amanda's going to do a workshop this afternoon. If you haven't heard about that, come find her afterward. It starts at 1 o'clock, I believe, here in the same facility, and we'd love any of you to attend that as well. You do have to purchase a ticket for that, but come and learn more if you're interested. But yeah, thank you, Amanda, so much for being here with us today, and welcome.
Well, good morning. I didn't bike here, but I probably should have. Would have taken me a little while, but I would have loved to have taken a break from work and biked here. So next time, perhaps. Well, this is an amazing event. Thank you to Drew and his team for putting it on, and thanks for having me here. I have been stepped into the CEO role at ILFI, 8 weeks ago, after being executive director for almost 2 years. So it's been busy. We've been making new strategic plans, and we've been launching new initiatives, and yeah, it's been a kind of a crazy time. So it's great to take this break and be with all of you and talk about what is really kind of my favorite subject, and the reason really why I do any of this, which is connecting all of us to nature. And I'll walk you a little bit through why I'm passionate about this subject. So I showed this once before at our Net Positive conference. It was the first time I've been doing, quite a bit of reflecting lately about, what really drove me to do this work. And I think when you take on, sort of a leadership role in an organization, there's a lot of stress sometimes in your day and a lot of pressure in your day. And there's also, sometimes you're like, oh, so why am I doing this? I have to re-engage with my purpose on a frequent basis, as I'm sure many of you do. This is a greenhouse I spent a lot of time with my grandfather in England. I grew up in the UK, and we just spent hours and hours and hours in here. And he was, quite a character, actually. He grew up, was brought up by his grandmother because his parents really weren't capable of taking care of him, and grew up in the heart of London, was a Cockney, and was a fireman during the war in London. And grew himself from, selling chickens and poultry at Smithfield Market to actually having his own store. And eventually was able to, purchase a home for his family, and really fell in love with gardening and making flowers. And showing flowers, which is really kind of a contrast to who he was, which was, originally a boxer and a fireman in London and quite a sort of stocky, kind of rough kind of guy. So anyway, I spent a lot of my childhood, when I think back to it, this is sort of my childhood memory of like it was about sweet peas and flowers. It was very romantic. It wasn't really a fancy greenhouse. It was pretty much strapped together, and the local kids would often throw rocks and smash panes of it, and it was always sort of, a work in progress to keep it whole. But I have this romantic concept of it that really shaped who I am. And he died about 17 years ago, and about 15 years ago I started growing dahlias and sweet peas myself, and somehow the smell of them and this took me sort of back to a connection of the beauty around us that really was formative for me as a kid. And then I moved to Australia, and I spent a lot of time doing this. A lot of time outside and a lot of time in pretty remote wilderness. Australia has an awful lot of remote wilderness that was pretty much a contrast to the built environment of the UK for me. And this was pretty formative. And I spent time then discovering architecture, learning how to be an architect, and working with some amazing people that created projects like this. And this was the kind of space I was spending my time in. It was really inside, but it was kind of outside. I was spending a lot of time in this in-between of inside and outside. And of course, Australia Sydney in particular has a perfect climate for that, which is a little different in the Pacific Northwest where I live now. But we really didn't have windows in our spaces. In Seattle, we'd get wet inside if we did this. But anyway, this was also a formative time for me to spend time. And this is a project by Peter Stutchbury, who I worked with for a year after graduating, in this sort of in-between of inside-outside. And so my real purpose in becoming an architect was to re-engage people with this inside-outside connection and find a way to make our architecture about this. And it's been a tough journey to sort of, to engage in this work, actually. You think it would be, as you're a graduate from architecture school, simple thing of, let's connect people more with outside and engage them with nature when we're in buildings. And we spend, 90% of our time inside buildings. So, I think many of us would prefer to have a real strong connection and engagement with nature, and not just in terms of a view or because it's pretty, but also because, our whole circadian rhythm is based on patterns of sun during the day, different seasonal patterns, and how we can actually engage with those when we're shut off becomes really challenging. So, my work at the Institute and before that focused on, green building has really been cemented in that connection between people. And, it's been occurred to me more and more as I went through this career so far that, we have this connection with nature when we're kids. We're really, even if we don't have, beautiful parks and wilderness to play in, we'll find some kind of dirt to play in, just watch kids outside. They'll find something to engage with, to make a fort, to dig in some way, or to find a frog or whatever it might be, to engage with nature somehow. And perhaps, they get the opportunity, we get the opportunity as kids to grow things like I did with my grandfather, or explore wilderness, hopefully. But, so we do all this as kids, and then when we come to our professional career as architects, engineers, builders, anyone in this field, we build this kind of stuff. So, I'm picking a worst case here, I realize that, but, to make a point, but there's a lot of buildings where we sort of build our schools so they look like jails, and we build our jails so they're really also not very restorative. So, why are we building like this when we have this amazing nature and world around us? And so that's something I'd love to change, and I know many of you in this room would as well, and that's why you're here today and why many of you are engaged in the world of biomimicry. You're going to hear from much better experts than me today on biomimicry. My passion has really been focused firstly on biomimicry, but then really sort of stemmed into the world of biophilic design. And the reason for that is sort of, what I've talked about so far this morning is that this deep connection between people and nature, to me, is the fundamental reason why we should do greener buildings, more sustainable buildings, living buildings, whatever you may want to call them. And I want to personally see, that we have an opportunity as a species to be connected, not separated from nature. So, in my work with living buildings, we have a biophilic design requirement in our program, and we've really been exploring what that means. Biophilic design means connection between people and nature. So how do we actually do it? This is a shot of the Birchie School, one of our certified buildings, where they've brought nature into the space, which is one way to do it, to bring in green walls, or to bring in also another thing, when you see kids playing in dirt of any kind, if there's any kind of water anywhere, you'll always see kids playing in it, right? So the opportunity for us to interact with simple parts of nature, whether it be green walls, water fountains. But for me, it's not just about this concept of bringing nature into the space or having parks or spaces where we can engage with nature in some way. We've also been working on this concept of what we're calling urban rewilding, and this is from a patterns document. We did a living community patterns project with the city of San Francisco, where we looked at what it would take to bring different living concepts into existing communities. And one of those patterns that we came up with was this concept of urban rewilding. As we have more and more people moving into urban areas, how can we create cities that are really wild and have these wild natural experiences within them? And the other concept on biophilic design is really looking at these natural patterns. We've had some living buildings like this one at Van Dusen really be inspired by their place and transfer that into the physical shape of the building, in this case sort of influenced from a termite mound, and looking at how they could naturally ventilate this space with this sort of termite mound-shaped center that can naturally ventilate the space by hot air rising naturally through the center here. And we also seen projects that really sort of think about this connection between people and nature by, the building kind of blending in with nature, right, becoming part of it, and really you can hardly see there's even a building here. And that is also, one approach to biophilic design. But for me still, the key approach is broader. All of these are strategies, but is this deep human-nature interaction between the inside-outside and our sense of being part of a bigger world than a sealed container of a building. And this is another shot of a space that I spent some time in Australia. I had the fortune to spend some time in where, again, it was really about being outside as much as inside, but it was also about sort of putting on a sweater when it was cool or taking it off when it was hot. I had the opportunity to visit one of our living buildings last fall in New Zealand. This is the first tribal center for the Tuhoi Maori people. They had their land taken away from them. They did not sign the treaty to give over their land to the British. And finally, that was acknowledged, and there was a settlement given to the Tuhoi people. And the national park, that is a major part of their land, was returned to their ownership. With that settlement, many in the community wanted to just distribute the money to each individual family, and there was much need. It's a community that has chronic unemployment, very challenging conditions for the community. But the elders felt that it was pretty important to set a stake in the ground about the future of the Tuhoi people, and to build this tribal center that would set a new direction for the community, one full of hope and pride, engagement in their culture, and allow there to be a space where that could be celebrated, and there could be positive programs and initiatives that could stem out of this building. So really seeing it as sort of like the heart of restoring this community from top to bottom. I went to visit them in the fall on a trip to New Zealand, and met with the tribal leaders and said, "This is such an incredible set of programs you're running through this building." And they said, "Yeah, the great thing is that we won't need this building soon." And I thought, wow, they're really not going to need it. It just opened. It seems kind of like a strange statement. And it's like, yeah, in 2 or 3 generations, we will have done our work. This building will have completed its work. All the programs we're running through this building and the initiatives and the pride that we're building in our community will have restored our community to, really be true leaders. And we'll have a healthy, thriving community, and we won't need this building. And it's sort of set at a different pace. So often I'm, working here in North America where we're talking about the immediate or in our lifetime. And, to see the power of a building to connect fully to culture, place, climate, and to create a restorative healing, and also within the context of that being about 2 or 3 generations was actually a sort of pivotal point for me of thinking about biophilic design quite differently versus thinking about what we could do immediately in this building. How can you use this concept of a deep connection to a place and culture to really restore a whole community? There is a full-length film about this project called Ever the Land. I encourage you to go to their website, actually. It's doing the film festival circuit right now, but I think you can get it on their website. If you can't right now, it's because it's at a film festival. There's some rules about that, but it'll be available to be able to see, and we showed it at Living Future, our conference last year, and we'll be showing it again. But it really does track how a building can restore a sense of people and place and culture. So we have this biophilic design requirement within the Living Building Challenge program. It set out a series of criteria like I just went through. How can we bring nature into the space? How can we have more interactions between people and nature? How can we use nature's patterns as an inspiration for our building work? I just did also want to mention that there's some incredible work that has been going on about what is biophilic design and how do we categorize it so that we can create a framework for others to use. And Terrapin, I know you're going to hear from Chris later, Terrapin have done some great work and really are leaders in this field in creating some patterns of biophilic design. I encourage you to take a look at those as well. And they really sort of are crossing over with the requirements within the Living Building Challenge. So today this event is really, a biomimicry event, and so I just want to talk about what biophilia and biomimicry mean for each other. We have focused on the relationship between people and nature within the Living Building Challenge, but we are also integrating biomimicry within our programs. And so this is sort of a, one set of definitions that you could use to think about them differently. Really think about them being very interactive and really symbiotic with each other. So biophilia, the relationship between people and nature; biomimicry, an approach to innovation that seeks solutions to human challenges by emulating nature's patterns. And Stephen Kellett and others who've written a lot about biophilic design think of biomimicry as a strategy of biophilic design. I don't think it's really about that kind of relationship. I actually think they're about achieving very similar philosophies. So this week, we launched a biophilic design initiative. It's been a real passion of mine to see biophilic design happen within our Living Building Challenge projects, but I would say it's one of the imperatives that I get the most resistance from for design teams, which is really ironic for me. Our design teams doing living buildings will say, well, what exactly do I have to show you to say that I've done biophilic design? I always do it. I build with natural light. I use natural materials. I just design that way. And, often they sort of miss the point a little bit of this being an opportunity to really examine culture, place, climate in an extremely deep level. So we have formed a biophilic design initiative with a bunch of really incredible partners working in this space. And we pretty sort of unanimously agreed that there's some incredible work on the research of why we should connect people with nature. There's some really good resources, but what we're missing is this sort of broad adoption of it within the design community, building owners, and cities. So we formed together to explore whether we could have, some impact on creating that broad adoption. And some really great partners, many of whom are here today: Interface, Glumac, Terrapin, the Phipps Conservatory, Google, Judy Heerwagen from GSA, and Vivian Lofness from Carnegie Mellon are also part of our initial founding group to explore this work. So and here's just the advisory team that's come together so far to discuss what this might mean. So in the workshop this afternoon, we're going to explore some of this with those of you that are able to stay or have already registered. We're going to explore how can we create this broad adoption of biophilic design. What will it take for that to happen? What resources do we need to provide? And I do encourage you to, it's also sort of an opportunity for us to bring together some of the incredible work that like Interface have done with their Human Spaces website, Terrapin have done with their patterns of biophilic design. Tim Beatley has been working on biophilic cities. And all of these partners that are coming together are trying to see how we can bring our common passion around biophilic design to this broad adoption. How can we create missing resources and strategies for people to actually implement this on a broad level? It's an exciting new initiative, and encourage any of you that are interested in it to join us. We're having our Living Future conference in Seattle in May. We're always looking for ideas on what a living future means, so another hashtag for you to think about today, if you didn't have too many already. And our conference will be May 11th, 13th, and at Living Future we're going to be holding a Biophilic Design Summit where we can be exploring how to put the ideas of biophilic design into action. Also encourage you to come and join us and keep engaging with us in the dialogue about how we can really make this happen broadly so that we can create more people with nature on a broad level. So with that, I think we're holding questions until the end. Be happy to answer them or at any time in the break. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Colin. Sorry. Thank you, everybody, for inviting me, through Sophia, and for the work done. One more, I guess. Okay. I'm here to talk about architecture follows nature, resilience in design through biomimicry, to address some of the hints from the title of the conference. I hope by my accent by now, and by actually in the introduction, you can see that I'm Italian, and I hope my accent actually will allow you to follow my talk today. I see nature as an adversary, or we all see that in some of the events that we are reoccurring, and they become harsher due to actually human activities, but also nature as a benefactor. We have been today exposed to the word biophilia, right, coined by the greatest living evolutionary biologist, E.O. Wilson. We are connected to nature, to its extreme beauty, the biodiversity, the complexity of nature. Nature has shaped us. I hope we all agree about that. And now technology is reshaping us, right? And I think this is an old slide, right? We all agree about that too. Nonetheless, there are now conferences about the side effects of being like this all the time. But in the Anthropocene, we have entered, with the Anthropocene, we have entered an era in which humans have been kind of changing the way that nature also performs. And that's why we have started to talk about resilience, right? It has become a front runner term for most of us. And it's very important as a systemic capacity of an individual, a forest, a city, or an economy to deal with change and continue to develop. It is about the capacity to use shocks and disturbances like a financial crisis or climate change to spur renewal and innovative thinking. Resilience thinking embraces learning, diversity, and above all, the belief that humans and nature are strongly coupled, to the point that they should be conceived as one social ecological system. And we know that the largest ecological system we can think of is Earth, right? But Earth also has its ecological thresholds, and we have been pushing some of them. But if we can work together to maintain within these ecological thresholds through what nature teaches us to evolve and to adapt, to continue changing, we can continue together with nature to develop. And through learning of how spur new renewals happens in a forest after a fire, we can perhaps address with innovative thinking how to bounce back issues similar to what happens in Haiti with the earthquake a few years ago. And ultimately, if we start thinking of these social ecological systems that put nature together with humans, and we start seeing ourselves not anymore as an egocentric pyramidal system, but more an ecocentric structure, right? We are all together in these. Perhaps this idea of interconnectedness really will bring us to different ways of working and performing. So these three basic lessons we can learn from nature, from its evolution and adaptation abilities, its regenerative abilities, and the co-evolution part, I think our architecture can also evolve. My background is in architecture, and so what I started looking at is really how these organisms that Colin called the superheroes were able to inspire our work. And in starting thinking of that in 2005, in reading a book called Body Heat, I started thinking, what is that, right? How can I take building systems and sustainability to the next step? And I discovered that there was a word that was biomimicry that was doing that. And others in other fields, you all know biomimetics if you think of robotics, right? Robotics has been inspired by nature for many years. So these are the background really of how I get to write the book, Architecture Follows Nature, Learning from Nature, that focuses on animal skins and building envelopes, and tries to do that not just at a metaphoric level, but really drawing the analogy by learning from nature what is skin characteristics. And for the ones of us that are architects, designers in the room, we know that wall section, right, tells us similar things that our skin sections can tell us. The skin helps us to thermoregulate, to water balance, to protect, to communicate. It connects us to the outside as much as it separates us. So if we look at nature, how to find inspiration, today I'm going to go quite quickly through three examples that you will find also in the book with more details. So to describe this biomimic and resilient architecture. The first example is the polar bear, which is definitely a superhero of the environment, right? So it holds also a very important space in our hearts when we think of conservation strategies for environmental issues. The habitat of the polar bear is definitely the important starting point when we think of how to design within a context, and the context being the environmental context. So as designer, we often talk about typological context or stylistic, right, to fit in within the cities. But to me, context is definitely the environmental one. So every study starts from understanding the frame, where the living organism is, to then start to analyze it a little bit as if it was a facade or a sketch of a building and kind of outline the animal and all the characteristics that are interesting, and in this case, to draw a section through the skin, to learn that the hollow fur allows the heat of the sun to penetrate deeply and to reach the black skin. Actually, polar bear have black skin. To absorb maximum heat and then being trapped into the fat and the mass of the building, but also looking at some of the behavioral aspects of living organisms. The cub and the mother are staying in the den during the cold seasons to be protected by the thermal mass of the earth and covered by the ice. So this set of observations and studies brought us to think of a building that could be inspired by both the den and the fur of the animal, and to think of something that we have conceptualized and developed to a point that I call it proto-architecture. These are not building built yet, but are ideas conceptualized by that. And so this is a small, compact unit synced in the ground and with an envelope that follows the sun angle to maximize the heat intake into the thick envelope and releases it with the interiors to construct a landscape of small, compact units that enable life in the cold. The next project that I want to go over is the banana slug and the sea slug. And we will talk about the ability of nature to regenerate and to bounce back. The later sea slug lives in the Caribbean islands, and around the time my students started studying it was the time that we experienced the Haiti earthquake and the power outage in the island, and we started thinking, how can we think of energy? And so the students learned by studying this organism that this Elysia crispata lives in the coral reef, and it's able by eating algae to photosynthesize them. And basically the color green is really because it photosynthesizes the algae. So by a sequence of studies, again, I go a little bit quick, is we thought to design like a tower, a beacon that was made of bladders full of water that is available in the islands because it's an island, and that could provide all the algae to become then biofuel to produce energy that was in shortage through the period of the earthquake, and is still a problem in the island today, almost 10 years after. So again, looking at an organism that we find in the same habitat of where then we design something is to find inspiration that is not a one-on-one inspiration, is not a biomorphism, is not designing something that looks like something, but it tries to perform, right? And we studied all the type of algae we could see and how long it would go through periods to get to maturity, to then design these wall sections of how we would harvest the biofuel for processing, and then with these renderings kind of place it on the site to also reconnect with the specific location. The third project and last one is how we can coexist and be interconnected with nature. And this is a lesson that we can learn from this tiny frog that lives in the tropics. And frogs are very interesting for many reasons, and they're also organisms that tell us the level of pollution in the environment, and that's why also many of them have disappeared in the past decades. But one thing that is very interesting is their breathing and their water balance system that happens through a patch that they have in their skin, and they basically lower themselves into a water pond, and they absorb through osmosis water, and they're able to water balance in that way. So the students, in this case, again, designed a museum for a place that is highly humid and how to preserve artifacts by layering the different zones of the museum, from artifacts that are not afraid of humidity to artifacts that are conserved in the core of this onion-like structure that is much drier. And it's done in a passive way without active systems. So they studied different elements that could create this building envelope, layering materials that desiccate and extrapolate humidity from the air and allows this kind of onion-like museum to exist by using only passive systems in countries where using active system is really not an option. So with these three projects, I try to show you how biomimetic architecture, by learning from nature, can really advance our inspiration. And through these proto-architectural examples, both in my office and at school, we think constantly of enhancing the link. This project is one of the many scales I'm working at, and was specifically looking at one aspect of nature, but I recognize by saying coexistence also multiscalarity, and was announced by Sophia this project that I have now of taking the observations of nature at the territorial level and looking through a summer multidisciplinary residency program of how we can collaboratively observe nature by being in nature. I live in Los Angeles, and I think there is lots of nature in Los Angeles actually, but often because we are spending 90% of our time indoor, as we have been told just a few minutes ago, and today is an example. We speak about nature, but we spend very little time in nature, or most of us. So the idea of the residency was really to share my own resources of this place in the Italian Alps, not far from Milano, the land of Leonardo da Vinci, the very first biomimetics, and not far from the mineral water Pellegrino, which you all know. There is this tiny village that has kind of 50% of its environment is wooded, and the rest of it are pastures. And it's well known, at least in Europe, for the cheese making. So that there is a circular economy in place that is highly relying on the resiliency of the territory. So with this project, we want every year to choose a subject, and this year is the woods, and I'm pleased that in every single presentation so far we have seen the woods or the forest as one of the leading super organism in a way, by thinking of the mycelium, to really invite people to come and to join this think tank, to think together, to create a place where we can hike and talk and think of how nature can be of inspiration for all of us, from ecologists to economists to designers. I think that our environment in the 21st century will really be called to be more resilient only if we will be able to interplay and interconnect more with nature. And with this, I thank you. I have no hashtag, sorry. I'm still based on the 20th century, only emails.
Thank you so much, Colin and Ilaria. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. This is really exciting conversations we're having. My name is Emily Hand, and I'm a project manager at Verdical Group, and I would like to introduce our speakers for the next panel, where they will discuss biomimicry ROI and the manufacturer's perspective. So first, we have Mikhail Davis. He is the Director of Restorative Enterprise at Interface, and he is joining us today from San Francisco. In addition to his work at Interface, Mikhail is also an active contributor to the Radical Industrialist column in GreenBiz. Next, we have Lorraine Francis from Gensler, where she serves as the Director of Hospitality Interiors. Lorraine is a New York native and spent her beginning was at Gensler as an associate,
spent 15 years as a principal of Cadiz Collaboration, and then rejoined Gensler in 2013 to oversee their hospitality interior design business. Lastly, please welcome Colin Mangum back to the stage, who will moderate this conversation on biomimicry, ROI, and the manufacturer's perspective. Thank you.
Hello again. I was pretty excited about this panel, partly because I do a lot of work in ROI and business modeling and entrepreneurial kind of business development and things. And so looking at how people exchange value, and that's not just currency, but intellectual capital and all sorts of things that, you know, make for a good exchange of value in the marketplace, exchange of value in this room. If I tell a joke and you laugh, that's an exchange of value. There's all kinds of exchanges of value going on. And in nature, you have some amazing exchanges happening. Most everything that goes on in form, process, and system in nature is in some way facilitating an exchange. If that's an exchange of genetic information, if that's an exchange of communication, Peacock does this, says, hey, I'm open for business, you know, whatever that is, you know, there's exchanges going on in nature. And so I really thought it would be fascinating to see, you know, particularly how these groups with Mikhail and Interface and Lorraine and Gensler are working together, exchanging value between themselves, both as manufacturer and a utilizer of that manufacturer. But also, how are they translating that into ROI at the ground level with the end users who are not always the customers? And just really curious about that. However, as we do in biomimicry and in all of nature, we adapt and evolve. And so I adapted to this off of my other panel, and then I've evolved my thinking in having spoken with Lorraine and Mikhail quite a bit and seen what they're about to present. And I really think I should get out of the way and just let them present this stuff because I know it's a lot of amazing information. I think what we'd like to do, though, is Lorraine first and then Mikhail. Is that? Are they in reverse? Okay. Well, you guys tell me, but do you want to switch it up or? I don't want to defy the deck. Don't defy the deck. Is that a hashtag? Okay. Whatever you guys want to do, but okay. All right. Adapting and evolving right before your eyes.
Ooh, this is a good view up here. It's great to be here. I'm native Californian, so it's split time between Southern California and Northern California. I live in Northern California, so it's fun to be down here. How many people here got a chance to meet this guy? Nice, smattering, lucky folks. This is Ray Anderson, the founder of Interface, who went through many metamorphoses in his life, from the son of a postman to a football star to a engineer to a carpet expert to an entrepreneur to a millionaire CEO, finally to what he called himself a radical industrialist, someone who was committed to changing everything that he'd based his career on, building up this carpet tile manufacturing company, and said, we've done everything wrong. That epiphany started about 20 miles down the road from here at the Downey Gas Company version of this center. When they were building that, the people building that asked this question that trickled all the way back to Ray, said, you know, what is Interface doing for the environment? This was 1994, and the answer to that was, the what? This had not yet penetrated, you know, Georgia industrial circles. So fun to be back here. This is really where it started, with that one simple question, which led to Ray's epiphany. Once he figured out what the environment was, it changed everything. And so today what we're going to talk about is that journey has really transformed the company. And when we talk about ROI and biomimicry, we've been doing this the longest, so it makes sense that we would have the most to show for it. We had people in to talk biomimicry with us almost 20 years ago, and we've made a lot of money off of biomimicry. So we're not a startup or a concept or a proto this or that. We actually have very mature innovations that form the basis of our profitability today. So I'd like to share a bit about that, which of course means I first have to tell you a little bit about carpet tile. So carpet tile in the traditional sense is either going to look like this. It's going to be trying to look like roll carpet, like broadloom, or it can look like this, or what we have on the floor here. It's going to look like a grid, a repeating pattern. Or it can look like that. It can have like an individual pattern on each tile. I don't know how well you can see that, but it's never supposed to look like this. You're supposed to be able to selectively replace it, and if you can tell which ones are the new ones, it's not working. So that's our first brand promise, is that you have to be able to selectively replace it. Otherwise, you might as well have the wall-to-wall roll carpet, the broadloom. So this was, Ray Anderson has his epiphany. About 5 years later, we meet Janine Benyus. We start to think about biomimicry. We organized this workshop where we send all the carpet designers out into the woods, at which point they thought we were totally crazy. It was very common in those early days. The folks back in Georgia were just like, oh my God, what are they making us do now? So basically sent them out in the woods and say, how would nature do your job? You design floors, how would nature do your job? And so we started to see is that there was not these repeating patterns or fixed grids or uniform, colors. We had all this randomness. It looked similar, it looked kind of good, it flowed, but it was not a repeating pattern. It was not what we were used to generating in manufacturing. So this was the first innovation. This was a style called entropy, sort of leveraging the chaotic yet pleasing flows of non-pattern we find in nature. This was a surprisingly big breakthrough. This looks like, oh yeah, whatever, it's a different carpet pattern. Really difficult to make a manufacturing error when it's supposed to look random. Really easy to install this when you can install it in any direction. Really easy to install a new tile in the middle of this if one gets an iron dropped on it or a giant wad of gum or whatever, because it all looks random anyway. So this was, if you think about the world of manufacturing, just get in our world for a second, we are trying to make identical widgets. And to the degree that they are not identical, it's a problem, it's waste, it's off quality. What if we're not trying to make them identical anymore? What if we are seeking this other aesthetic? It creates all kinds of opportunities. So you can see some of our styles, we've gone even further into more organic, inspired by other floors and textures found in nature. The new technology allows us to do fully organic patterns where we can actually create stuff that looks like the surface of the ocean and create new heights and textures. But it's all this same simple concept of randomness that we borrowed from nature back when we sent all the carpet people out into the woods. So then you can play with edges, make stuff that looks like moss. You have basically two random patterns next to each other and then another one that connects them. So that was one thing. That became the best-selling style when we introduced that first style ever. It's now about 50% of what we sell is in those random patterns. Something everyone in the industry has tried to copy, some explicitly infringing on our patents, but it's made modular carpet better. Our next thing that we took on, and just to quickly go through another key innovation, was we said, well, nature worked so well on that I2 random pattern thing, what can it do about this sticky issue of glue? Because we glued our carpet tile to the floor, which is still pretty common. And then we started trying to recycle it, and we'd be pulling it up, and it was stuck to the floor, and it was covered in glue. You also have a lot of the VOCs. A lot of what smelly carpet is actually the glue curing. It's not actually the carpet itself. So we said, well, what can nature teach us about this? And we went into this process, which Colin and other folks touched on, where we started iteratively trying to find a question that nature could answer. And you find as you get into the discipline of biomimicry that getting to the right question is key to the process. You have to ask nature a question that's going to give you a cool solution set focused on relevant innovations. So we started with this. Obviously, nature doesn't install carpet, but how would nature create a glue? There's a few examples of that, mussels clinging to rocks and other things. But we really started to find interesting solutions, and we started to look at how does nature keep things on the ground? How does nature adhere? These sort of more abstracted things. We looked at the gecko, which doesn't use glue, but it can adhere to the ceiling. That technology wasn't quite ready, but it's a really cool technology of how it uses these micro hairs and van der Waals forces of weak magnetism to cling to anything. But really the question we ended up with, when we talked about keeping things on the floor, was how did nature optimize the pull of gravity? How do we ride for free, which is the real challenge in biomimicry? How do we get aligned with how things want to work such that nature does the work for us, in this case, gravity, which looked like innovation where we just take these little tabs, 3 by 3, single-sided adhesive, connect the tiles to each other. One tile maybe weighs 2 pounds. That's 2 pounds of force holding on the floor. 30 tiles, that weighs 60 pounds. It's probably going to stay on the floor. So we actually get nature to do, gravity to do the work for us. Makes it really easy to recycle, and you can install it. Now we can have a business where we sell area rugs to people in their houses because you actually would put this over your wood floor because you don't have to put glue on your beautiful wood floor. So it's created all these possibilities. So if you want to talk ROI, it's all over the place. We have whole new business units out of biomimicry. This guy knows how to optimize gravity. But it's this wonderful tool for innovation to get you out of your assumptions, to get you listening to nature and figuring out how do we go with the flow rather than fighting against nature. So I just want to quickly touch on some of the stuff we're doing at the level of the company. We've done, those are two of our key product innovations, but really it's informed our whole strategy of the company. How do we collaborate with nature, like the clownfish and the anemone here? How do we get in harmony with nature? This is the promise that we made back when Ray had his epiphany, to eliminate any negative impact we may have on the environment by 2020. How do you do that? That's one of these sort of moonshot impossible goals. And how you do that is you start to look for miracles, because we don't know how to do that. So fortunately, nature is a font of miracles. Nature is filled with these miracles, and so this is the partner we need to accomplish our impossible goals. And when you look at it, you can look at what we have today. We've got, over on this side, we have, this carpet looks kind of like moss. It's got some aesthetic qualities. It's fully recyclable. It can have 80% recycled content. It's very low VOC. It's really reduced the negative impact on the environment. Then we go over to nature's floor, and then we get really humble, because nature is not low VOC. In fact, the VOC it puts up is called oxygen. It's actually, fully biodegradable, but it's also making soil and habitat, and it heals itself. Wouldn't that be cool in a carpet? So this is our model. This really shows us how much further we have to go. We've done a lot to eliminate some of the negative stuff. We're continuing to be inspired by what more we could do. This at the facility level, we're now working with Biomimicry 3.8 on a pilot at our Australia factory, saying, okay, our factory, we can decrease its negative impact, but how can we make our factory as generous as a natural ecosystem? If that factory, that piece of land, was still a virgin ecosystem, it would be doing all of these things, sequestering carbon, storing and purifying water, retaining sediment to create soil, detoxifying pollution. Can our factory do that? So it's not about LEED or reducing our impact. It's about, can we make our factory generous? That's what nature would do. Similarly, on this vein, we started looking at, we can source our materials from better places, but what if we could source our materials in a way that actually solved a problem? Solved this problem, for instance. This is Southeast Asia, but it really could be any number of ports, gummed up with fishing nets. There's nothing to do with them. Once they have holes in them, they just get discarded. They catch stuff, The whole problem of phantom fishing, when you drop a net in the ocean, when you're done with it, it keeps catching stuff. Whales, turtles, fish, dolphins. So this is a program we started with the Zoological Society of London. In the Philippines, it's now in Cameroon as well. We'll be expanding it to more countries this year. We basically provide local net collection in a community banking structure. You can bring in your spent nets or pull them off the reef or wherever you find them. The same kind of nylon that we use to make carpet yarn. This is actually a material we need. So we're sourcing the same material we need to make carpet while alleviating poverty, diversifying household income, helping restore a really diverse reef ecosystem, and giving people a way to make money that doesn't involve fishing in an already overfished area. So again, trying to find a way to not just be zero impact, but to be generous, because that's what nature would do. And so, of course, we're in offices. This is where we touch into biophilia. How would nature design an office? That's one way to think about some of what we're doing in biophilic design. What if you felt like this when you went to the office? That's regenerative. That's what nature would do. And I think that's the goal of biophilic design at a very emotional level is, what if that was what going to the office felt like? That's what we're going for. So again, goes back to Ray's original vision. To his eternal credit, on the first day he spoke about sustainability, he talked about being restorative, not just sustainable. He said, I want you, who's talking to the task force at Interface, to show me, go out and figure out how we can become the world's first restorative enterprise, a company that goes beyond doing no harm to put back more than we take and to do good with every yard of carpet we make and sell. So that's the vision, and I believe that's how nature would run a company. I'm going to leave it there, and we'll get to questions. And
So I'm Lorraine Francis with Gensler, out of the Newport Beach office and the Los Angeles office. So my thought is actually I'm passionate about hotel design. So, and what I love really about hotels is actually it uses so many different aspects of our life, from sleeping to food and beverage to kind of our social aspect of getting together. So when I think a biomimicry lens is kind of just another tool in our toolkit of design to really look at the return on investment of the guest experience. And I always love this picture of this boy because I read Richard Lou's Last Child in the Woods, and I have an 18-year-old son, and kind of seeing him growing up, and a lot of our pictures of kind of connecting with our families. But actually, in terms of travel, I think a lot of things in the hotel industry have been changing in terms of travel. So I'm going to talk about some key drivers that are affecting us in the design process and how we're looking at that. So some of the key design drivers, we're looking at the rising middle class, the millennials. Everyone's talking about the millennials. What do we do with millennials? And also just accessible luxury and ecotourism. And these are just some key drivers that kind of influence our design and with all our clients. And we'll talk about one key project at the end of this of how we're kind of studying that and how to look at it differently. So the middle class. So, we do a lot of work all over the world, and we're dealing with a lot of Chinese clients here, and also just looking at how, we're going to have 3.2 billion middle-class individuals in 2020, and that's rising from 1.8 billion in 2009. So that's a big influence. And, how are those people going to come into the world and look at their, vacations and resorts and where they're going, and what are we going to create differently in the guest experience to influence them? So the second one's the millennial travelers, and that's kind of a key to, that age group of 21 to 35. And really those are, the doing business travels of the future, and really how their lives are so blended in business and in work, and kind of much more mesh than some of the past travelers. So how are we reacting to millennials in general? And then I think a third one is the key of accessible luxury. And I think luxury used to be much more for the elite, but how are, in our hotel experiences, how are we getting away further into nature? Because I feel like people want to have a different experience as they move forward. And this lower slide is Amangiri in Utah, and it's a spectacular resort. And I think it's really one of those biophilic elements where you really kind of connect with nature, and kind of your living experience, your social experience, and your sleeping is all connected to the great beauty of Utah. And I think this top one is actually this great resort. I think this is in Norway, but it's actually more of this greenhouse of this mirror of being really tied into, the beauty of nature and being like sitting and resting there and just kind of being perched up. So how is that influencing our design? And the third one is kind of ecotourism. And I think we talk a lot about millennials, but also how their values and how they make their selections really are charging where they want to go and what they want to do. And kind of this, where are we going further away to get away from our phones and all of our technology? So how does biomimicry play a role in this? So we'll kind of look at some different ideas how we use it as an influence in our design process. So I like actually how you showed that the polar bear den, and I think this is the beautiful thing about, biomimicry and looking at the bios being life and mimesis being imitate, and kind of this idea of this beautiful hotel kind of being underground and the geothermal process of looking at kind of being this polar bear in this den. Doesn't have the cool skin on top, but I think this is a beautiful kind of a unique experience of how you get away somewhere differently. And then also looking at the influence of, furniture design and other ways we can look at, the FF&E of a hotel design. And I think just taking the inspiration from nature and looking at it in terms of form, and then also in terms of processes, and then in terms of ecosystems. So I'm going to look at a couple of different examples for all three of these aspects of it. So, nature form, I think this is always our inspiration. I'm not sure how many architects and designers are in the audience right now. So who's an architect or a designer? Yeah, it's like 50% of the group. Great. But I think we're always kind of, inspired by, natural patterns, and I think there's a bottom right photo. It's just that, that lobby experience, and also that idea of, and actually I took a trip to Peru. We can talk about Peru later, but kind of just going to a Westin in Lima. And I think my experience was the Westin in Lima could have been the Westin in Chicago. And I think that was, I didn't really travel, 10 hours on plane to get down there, and also just to be in a Westin. So, that idea of, looking at this leaf structure of, a sense of place at this lobby, and kind of that connecting to the outside. And if 90% of our time is spent indoors, if you land on a business trip and you're somewhere, where are you? And you're just kind of sleeping for a couple of days, but still having that connection to a sense of place. And this beautiful form of this pavilion, and kind of this breathing aspect of it, and being kind of influenced by, leaves and nature itself on a simple form. And then how this kind of goes into a different level. This bottom right is actually the W in Atlanta, and it's all about this whole underwater sea experience and how that's kind of incorporated, and kind of brings us a playful, unique aspect of it. And then how it comes a little bit more literal with this top left, which is more about this tree structure, but kind of this connection of, this full glass wall connecting to the outside trees, and then also being the structure of the restaurant itself. And then obviously the top right is a little bit more of a modern take on it, but I think there's a beauty of this kind of unraveling, and how do you take that aspect of biomimicry of a tree, but dissect it into a beautiful design element on some columns. And the next one is more about natural ecosystems, and I think just even this retail experience of looking at the bees, and kind of how those kind of become the honeycomb aspect of it, and kind of be used in a retail experience. And just this top right is actually a trip that I took to Peru, and actually did a 50-mile trek over the Salcantay Pass to Machu Picchu. And I just did this a couple of years ago, but I think it was one of those experiences or vacations that really stay with you. And I left my husband and my son and my dog home, and I just took 3 weeks off. And during this 50 miles, it was actually, my knees actually are really bad. So the Andes are really steep. So actually I wind up paying for this horse for $75 to follow me for those 5 days, because I don't evac out of there. But I think just that grounding experience of walking, by the time I actually got to Machu Picchu, is really uneventful. And I think the beauty of getting over the 16,000-foot pass that I was actually concerned about doing at 48 years old at the time was am I going to be able to make it? So, but I think that that's inside of me, and that trip was so potent to just grounding me and to connecting me, and also not having any devices or anything with me. And there was so much beauty of this, and this top right was the Sacred Valley after the whole trip. And it was kind of this whole beautiful mystery of, actually I don't really know what it's from, but it was almost this agricultural testing ground. And actually on this, there's a 27 degrees difference from the bottom of this kind of beautiful Sacred Valley Inca agricultural place on the top. So just kind of that experimenting of it, and kind of seeing something so beautiful in this 11,000 foot elevation was really kind of spectacular. But I think it's just those things that inspire us to kind of take that back into how we design, and looking at this other resort on the left, and how it has very little impact on the environment. But so you can go in there and experience the hospitality, but then you're not really having this harsh impact on it, and you're taking that away to your next adventure. And then I'm just talking about a couple of different conceptual hotels that have been done. And actually, they're not Gensler projects. They're just different projects that are going around the globe, and not really built yet. But this is actually a little bit more of an eco-hotel in Florida. And it's just about having this breathing skin, and looking at kind of, the solar energy and wind power, and how that's kind of feed into the hotel and the guest rooms. And also this has a vertical garden inside, and how that could be used for the whole food and beverage experience for all the guests who are staying there, and kind of the elevated aspect of it off the ground, and being more kind of just a little bit more whimsical and light. And this is kind of the idea of reuse. This is actually an old mine in China concept. And how do you take something that's actually been kind of, used and non-beautiful anymore, and how do you actually encourage the design of something into the cliffside? So how do you reuse that into beautiful and using that geothermal power of how the mine was excavated? So, so to me, this kind of idea of hospitality and nature and this connection is really beautiful. And this one on the left is William McDonough. It's kind of a building in London, but it's that whole idea of using a tree and kind of the idea of, this tree kind of being on the left side open and being more about those gardens and this kind of whimsical skin kind of growing from the ground and up above. And we did a similar building. We just opened the Shanghai Tower, which is actually the second tallest tower in the world. And that was actually about this twisted skin, a little bit more like this dragon that just opened. It has a hotel aspect in it, and then it has a beautiful office space. But actually, every 15 floors, there's these atrium spaces. So there's kind of this reprieve for all the guests or the hoteliers, to come and actually relax. So it's kind of, this beautiful urban building and tower that's similar to the William McDonough one, but it also has this aspect of kind of thought and to stop. And then this on the right side is actually this Grace Farm in New Canaan, Connecticut that just opened a few months ago. And it's actually how really having this beautiful public building, how that melts into the ground and melts into the farm to really not have this least amount of impact. And we're actually doing a building for Quicksilver Hotel and Resorts that has a similar idea about connecting down to the aspects of the natural environment around it. And this is actually a beautiful new concept of, just kind of New York growing in terms of construction, this urban vertical farm that would be part of New York, and really taking this inspiration from the dragonfly and the wing structure and, with all this urban growth into the cities, like how are we dealing with farm aspects and food aspects into the cities? So I think this is a beautiful inspiration from the dragonfly. So how is it done? How are we going to do it? I think for us as architects and designers, it's really about education. So, the hotel industry is a little bit trickier because it's not just like one owner. We actually have the developer, and then we also have the brand. So you might have Starwood, and Starwood has, their 13 brands. So how do we kind of always do this funny dance with it? And, and a lot of developers build hotels for 5 years and then push it onto the market to resell it. So the hotel industry is a little bit different than just kind of a typical office environment. So it's always about education and education and education, and selling it. But I always love this idea of this biomimicry thinking and how do we do it from the beginning. And I think, one of the struggles always is not having our entire team on board at the beginning. We don't always get our MEP on board early enough, so we always try. But, getting our structural to relook at the way we design and our process, and having that really time to do discovery and abstract, and also getting to that brainstorming and trying things out. And of course, it's always getting down to measuring and our return on investment and how we're kind of getting that point across. So, but I think this is actually a good chart to really understand the process and how do you actually change the process the way we've been doing it for so long, and actually to relook at inspiration on it to think about things differently. And I kind of talked briefly about this William McDonough building, but it was really based on the tree. But I think it was kind of just that whole idea of, the waste aspect, the water aspect, the farm aspect, and also the productivity and the workspace aspect of it. So this is one of our projects, which is actually Quicksilver Hotel and Resorts, and they are licensing the name from Quicksilver, so it's separate from the Quicksilver company that's kind of doing a restructure on their bankruptcy right now, which is a billion-dollar company. The Quicksilver Hotel and Resorts came to us about a year ago and was one of their first projects being actually in the desert. So, and they want to do this incredible, like Kelly Slater wave pool in the desert. So I think we kind of looked at it like, how do we really have this beautiful hotel kind of flow into the desert? And kind of this is a start of some master planning concepts of it, and it's going to, as we develop it, we're going to kind of take it to the next level. But it was also, it was 400 keys. We also had a kids center to it, and also wanted to have people come there during the day, and also to try out this new wave pool technology. And how do we work with recycled water and evaporation and lots of different aspects to, make this achievable. So we're moving forward. But I think actually the best part of this project has been this whole idea of what we do with all our clients is we actually do these vision sessions. And I think what's different about doing this in terms of working with a current brand that's a little bit more set in their ways, like a Starwood or a Marriott, is actually developing a new idea. And I think with our vision session, we really had to come up with actually the DNA of this company and the DNA of looking at it in a hotel environment. So we came down to these, it's a little smaller up there right now. But the basic DNA was actually like challenging your soul forward and then looking at, I don't have my glass now, but celebrating this effortless joy of authenticity. And I think with Quicksilver being such a proponent of water, being a really great global steward, so how are they going to do that moving forward? And this drive to this relentless pursuit of what's next, and that's kind of in terms of innovation, and how do you actually recreate hotels in a different way? And then this infuse of this sense of being part of a tribe. So, and I think what's different about Quicksilver, it's actually, our client is actually made up of a lot of the older surfers, so who are kind of looking more for a 5-star experience as the developer itself, but they're also looking for, this whole new tribe of surfing and how they're going to bring people in. So having a hotel that could actually really react to that and the different people who are going to come to it and be able to be changing, so it's not really just set for, a W-type client or a JW Marriott-type client, and having this diversity. So we just really took this time to really look at this, celebration, this effortless joy of authenticity. And I think some of the keywords that came on from this brainstorm was actually that concept of being stoke, and kind of like that whole idea of getting up on that surfboard, whether it's for that 2 seconds and you fall down, or if you have that great wave, and those moments in your life where you just have that sense of stoke. And so I think it's really, how are we creating an environment, a hotel around that to really imbue that spirit of it and that connection. And I think just obviously being a global steward is really key for this brand. And I think, this is where, biophilic design and biomimicry is really this kind of connection of being part of their story and developing this brand, and us developing this brand with them. So I think that's really a critical aspect of it. And this kind of, how we're going to really have the staff be these global stewards. And I think actually we've worked a lot with Citizen M, and Citizen M is a micro hotel. So we've worked on some of the one in New York. And I think the aspect of it is that every person, every employee in that hotel doesn't just become the person at the front desk and doesn't become just the person at housekeeping. And every person who actually works there has to actually do every single job in the whole facility. So that really kind of brings this whole authentic experience to the staff and to the guests at the same time, and doesn't create that divide between back of house and front of house. So I think that global steward part is critical. And this endless pursuit of what's next. And so it's like not doing the same design of hotels. I mean, I could tell you how many hotel rooms I've designed, but kind of like what's that new innovation of it, and what's kind of going to be that new changing of it. So we're just starting to look at the model rooms for this, and also looking at technology and how that's going to play a really important role into developing the future of this hotel and having it stand apart. So, and then this whole thing of the sense of belonging and this idea of this like tribe, and I think we working on a really large 1,800 key hotel in Cancun, and it's all inclusive, but it's also about like, what is that sense of tribe and people? And when you go away for a couple of days, or you go away, it's not always fun on a business trip when you're alone, but how do you actually have that connection? So we're seeing that changing in the hotel market also, in terms of we're working on a hostel hotel in San Francisco. And it's a little bit of kind of that reinvention of that old hostel to be this new spirit of this hostel, like, kind of this Airbnb disruptor, and how that's going to affect the hostel market. Because it's more about, there's a hostel in Chicago called Freehand, and it's more like the rooms or the bunk beds only cost $25 a night, and the cocktails are $25 a piece. So it's that funny aspect that someone will stay there and spend $150 on cocktails, and then they get to sleep in the bunk bed for $25 a night. But I think it's actually about wanting that tribe and wanting that sense of place. And I think this is where, biomimicry kind of, imbues that kind of sense of place to where you're traveling to, and how do you take that connection home with you. So, and then it's also that whole idea of, you know, challenging your soul forward. And I think for me to go to Machu Picchu a couple of years ago, you know, it was really kind of that thinking is, am I going to be able to do that? So, you know, I'm going to be at 16,000 feet, and I haven't done that. So, you know, so what are we doing in our everyday from, you know, being younger to older to always challenging ourselves forward and looking at design in new ways, which is critical. So I thank you for your time and just kind of understanding the hotel market and kind of how really, you know, biomimicry as a lens is really just an added gift to our toolbox to kind of move the hospitality industry forward. Thank you.
All right, folks, man, what a morning. Please stay seated for just a second. I got a couple announcements, but we are going to go to a break. It says 10 minutes, but we're going to do a 20-minute break. But everybody should have gotten a program when they walked in. There's a survey on the back of this. It takes 1 minute to complete. It's 7 questions, and it'll really help us understand what people's thoughts are about biomimicry and doing this event moving forward. So please do that survey. There's also pens at the registration table, and hand it to the registration table now or on your way out later. Use this time to talk with each other, figure out how we can all collaborate. There's a lot of really great people here today and companies. A couple of those are listed on the screen. I'm not going to read them all, but Mohawk Group, Promise Energy, RBB Architects, HDR, IBEW, many others. Take a look at who's listed there. Go get some coffee, some food. Come back in 20 minutes. It is 10:50, so we'll see you back here at 11:10.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm going to give everyone another 30 seconds to find their seats, get settled, and we're going to get started with the second half of the conference. Okay, super. I hope you all enjoyed the break, got some coffee, got to meet some of the other attendees today. Our next panel features Nicole Isle and Heather Joy Rosenberg discussing biophilia and resilience. Nicole is the Chief Sustainability Strategist for Glumac. She's joining us today from Portland, Oregon. And a systems thinker at heart, Nicole is a trained biologist at the design table through the Biomimicry Guild, and she co-created the Biomimicry Oregon Network. Heather is the director of the USGBC-LA Resilience Initiative. She's based here in LA and trained in both ecology and community development. She's worked on the leading edge of sustainability for more than a decade. I'd like to invite Nicole first.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for sticking around for round 2. I'm going to switch gears a little bit, kind of return to the concepts that Amanda Sturgeon talked about during her awesome keynote this morning, biophilic design. A little bit about us. Glumac is a design engineering firm that delivers green buildings that work. My role there is a sustainability advocate and to bring creativity and new ideas to our clients and to our projects. And a little bit about my background. I studied aquatic ecology in college, did environmental consulting for a number of years, spent years out in the field doing research. I spent a summer in a dry suit at night underwater, surveying underwater salamanders all night for 3 months in like 50 different ponds in the Central Cascades. Spent field work up in Alaska, trying to stay away from bears. There are a lot of bears. And so I have real ties to nature. I just feel like it's in my heart, it's in my bones, so it's where I return to when I think about solutions to design challenges. Glumac works on commercial, institutional, advanced technology, and healthcare facilities worldwide. And our services have expanded beyond MEP consulting engineering to help our clients design, model, test, measure, and verify building performance, something that's really important to us in defining sustainability and green building. And we value a culture of great people, great clients, working on great projects. So I'd like to jump into the presentation and talk a little bit about the differences between biomimicry and biophilia, and then dig deeper into the concepts that Amanda talked about through 3 case studies at different scales: the tenant improvement space, the building, and the block. So looking at biophilia, biophilia is this innate biological connection that we have with nature, and we learned about that this morning. And as an example, in this atrium, this wonderful daylight, the presence of daylight has been shown through numerous studies to help improve mood, regulate our digestive system, help develop new cells in our bodies, and regenerate our organs. And so it makes a lot of sense that biophilia is something that we incorporate into our buildings, because buildings is where people spend a lot of time, and buildings are a precious asset. People are a precious asset to build to business. And so if you think about improving the comfort and the health of the buildings, knowing that the body is so closely tied to biology and that we need it to feel our best through the course of the day, we're raising those productivity levels and quite arguably doing more to improve the financial return of business than saving energy and water, I would say. Biomimicry views nature as a trove of technological solutions. So an example here might be, and we've seen it this morning already, is if you were to model the thermal stack effect of ventilation through this space after a termite mound. So I'm drawing this example from Mick Pierce's design of the Eastgate Center in Zimbabwe. We modeled the atrium, but we didn't use biomimicry as the inspiration here in the design. I'm merely creating a comparison between biophilia and biomimicry. So biophilia and biomimicry is smart design that saves businesses money. Terrapin Bright Green, Chris Garvin here, they put together some excellent resources, pulling together the best building science out there. Well over 100 studies that talk about the benefits of biophilic design, the health of people connecting with nature, and by inviting that into buildings, it returns profit to companies. So the type of metrics that we're looking at are improved productivity, creativity, comfort, attraction, improved happiness. Biomimicry also provides metrics in that it's been shown as a way to solve technological challenges, whether it's a product, whether it's a design challenge, for example, and it's bringing new innovation and proven solutions, higher levels of performance and efficiency, and of course, nature's best attribute bringing beauty into our buildings. So I find the easiest way to approach biophilic design, and here we are returning to the many wonderful stories that our speakers have given this morning, is to think about your favorite place. And we've had a lot of images about forests now, and this is one of my favorite places. But if you think about your favorite place, wherever it might be, maybe it's with your family, and it's not even in nature. Family is biophilic. We are nature. If it's again, at the beach or wherever it may be, think about what it is about that place that makes you feel so good. Is it the dappled light that creates it creates a sense of calmness in you, or is it the patterns of the leaves that make you feel more creative, for example, or it just awakens your senses? And then think about what makes this place such a great place to you, and then work on designing toward it. So thinking about how those sensations can be incorporated into our building design by incorporating natural ventilation, incorporating nature's forms, incorporating the amazing dynamic nature of light. And you create this multi-sensory experience that's just pure candy for the human, our 5 senses. It just elicits pure delight. Again, Terrapin Bright Green's 14 Patterns of Biophilic Design, strongly encourage you to take a look at it. I return to it constantly to center myself around project goals. So let's go into the first scale. I've got 3 case studies here. Let's talk about the tenant space. This is Glumac's Shanghai office. It's Asia's first LEED B4 project. It went platinum, and we're currently undergoing the performance period for Living Building Challenge. Our biophilic design story here starts with place-based history and relationships. We leased 5,000 square feet of space in this building, and this is part of a campus that was originally built in 1913 for the John D. Rockefeller family. And so when you look around this campus, it's absolutely stunning, the old architecture, and we look to those ideas to incorporate them into our design. When you enter the front office, you see these Chinese lucky clouds that greet you at the door, and they're a symbol of good fortune and happiness in Chinese culture. So again, drawing on those place-based relationships. When you enter the reception area, there's this organic form called a kabarak cloud. And it's this whimsical feature, it's this wonderful biomorphic form, and in biophilic terms, it adds complexity and order to the space. But really, in layman biophilia terms, it's pure eye candy. It's fanciful, your eyes just are drawn to it, and it just elevates your experience, your mood in that space. Most of the wood in China is imported, so we use salvage product to create that material connection with nature. And again, reuse, copy that idea of the Chinese lucky clouds in these reception stools. Looking into the bistro area, it faces west, and when the sun is low, a switch frosts the glass. And so it creates a diffuse light condition. It also creates more privacy in this space. A point of refuge is a biophilic pattern that's used. And it gives user control. Giving control in a space, whether it's over light or thermal comfort, is biophilic in that it helps occupants tailor their needs in that space. If you think about being outside, if you're too hot, you might go under a tree. If you'd like to warm up, you may sit on a warm rock. You've got the dynamic and varied conditions outside that you can find a comfortable space. And so that idea of giving control to users inside a building, I think, is very biophilic as an approach that we can use in design when thinking about control systems in our buildings. The terrace is gorgeous. This is the Rockefeller mansion that we're looking out onto here. Very, mature vegetation, great views of nature. The brick is salvaged Shanghai gray brick that's found in the oldest architecture in the city. Looking into the work area from the bistro, I want to talk a little bit about thermal comfort and controls, light. These are conditions that are that we understand to be most important to the engineering of buildings when it comes to biophilic design. So the floors are radiant and very low energy, and it's a great way to warm the body. When you think about your feet are the furthest extremity from your heart and often the coldest part of your body, and so it's an excellent low energy way to heat and to provide thermal comfort to occupants. There's also operable windows for occupants to open when the conditions outside are right. And we've got these ambient task lights that give control to occupants. The down and up light creates a nice diffuse dynamic light condition in the space. It's the main source of lighting here. And user control at their desk. And then you get this nice line of sight, this prospect across the office space to this green wall that's sort of like fanciful. It just sort of catches your eye. It's a bit of mystery and intrigue, and you want to like walk down that hall and check it out. And the employees just love to run their hands against it and just feel the textures in that wall, get that sensory feeling. So when is it the right condition to open your window in Shanghai? Do you really want to do that? So that's something that we grappled with. In air quality in China is, #1 health concern.
So you talk about operable windows, and doesn't quite make sense. Although, you know, with Living Building Challenge, the idea is that we're challenging ourselves to build better so that we have a future where there's healthier air. And so we're readying ourselves for that. And so in our office, we've got an app that was developed by Reset and Reset and Pure Living. And the two of them, they got together, they created this app, and it shows real-time data on indoor air quality and outdoor air quality conditions. So it's a wonderful way for employees to check out when conditions are right. When it's terrible outside, people tend to work longer, and we call it productivity enhancement technology. So that's perfect. Moving on to the building, the next scale. This is Arc Nexus's latest Living Building Challenge. It's a major renovation of an 8,200 square foot building that will become their new office in Sacramento. And some of the features here are this linear side-by-side paneling on the exterior of the building and elements of their net positive water design. For their Living Building Challenge approach, we had a full-day charrette that was focused around biophilia. We spent the first 2 hours just poring over 150 years of Sanborn maps and looking through the cultural and natural history of the place and the location in Sacramento. They're at the delta of the Sacramento and the American River. Native American Indian tribes there are just a few, and we really took notice of their construction in dress and the way they built this linear side-by-side pattern of pulling reeds together, and also in the historic rail form. And so what they did is they incorporated this into the exterior paneling that I showed, that side-by-side construction approach. And then also in thinking through drought conditions in California and the presence of water in Sacramento, they knew that it was really important to incorporate a closed-loop system when it came to water recycling. And recycling water is very biophilic, especially when you make it visible. So in their design, they are collecting rainwater, they're recycling gray water, and they are releasing extra water through a green wall and then into site landscaping. And that just presence of nature, of having this green wall that will extend inside and outside of the building and take care of excess gray water, is a great way to connect occupants with nature's systems and also bring them closer to the water system that we live in. So I'm going to move on to the block. This is the last scale that I'm going to take a look at. This is a 4-block project in downtown Portland. This is the east side of the river. You can see downtown Portland Central Business District across the river there. This is with GBD Architects, and Biohabitats, a natural systems designer, helped us design a wastewater treatment system for this development. It houses 657 apartment units, 50,000 square feet of retail and commercial space, over 1,000 bike hub, and it's going LEED Platinum. And this is a really interesting project because this project integrates a full wastewater treatment system. And what it does, it uses mechanical and natural treatment through the use of a series of tidal wetlands to take 45,000 gallons of sewage every day and turn it into usable gray water for toilet flushing, for cooling, and irrigation in the three new buildings. So taking a look at some of the pictures, we are using green roofs to infiltrate the stormwater, and we're not collecting it. Instead, we have a 60,000 gallon tank that collects some of the rainwater into a water feature that's in the plaza space, and the rest is infiltrated to slow down the peak stormwater flows. The recycled waste is collected, and the whole system is made into an amenity for the space. And so these three these three tanks here are the first step in the recycling system. These are trickling filters. They collect the sewage and go through a series of filtration processes. And they are housed right here in the plaza for everybody to see them. And then from this step, the water is gravity fed through, on your right, a series of tidal wetlands. And people can walk along these wetlands. It feels like an elevated boardwalk. It gives a sense of connection with nature, nature's systems. They see a presence of water as you see the water filtering through the system. It's also a bit of mystery and intrigue and a bit of risk, because you do feel like you're on this elevated boardwalk, which is totally different from your urban paradigm of walking along sidewalks. So it's an interesting, curious experience for folks living in this community. Here's another picture of the first, the trickling tank, and then the tidal wetlands. After the tidal wetland process, the water goes into a denitrification unit, also called a membrane bioreactor, and then there's a final stage of UV treatment and ozone treatment. And so the landscape here was designed by Place, did an excellent job working with Biohabitat to design this system. So I'm going to leave it at that. I just want to share some case studies with you of some different projects that we're using and thinking about connecting people with nature through engineering systems, through design. And I think some of the most important aspects that we're looking at, again, are light, user controls, and thermal comfort and indoor air quality. Thank you.
Hi. Okay, so now we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk not so much about building design, but more about ongoing operations, which is something we've been thinking about, and this notion of resilience. Resilience is an ecological concept, and I'm an ecologist by training, so I like it. And we are pulling from a model or from an understanding of how ecosystems work and how they change over time. What resilience is bringing to the table, the reason we're talking I still talk about sustainability, but resilience is really important to me, is it implies the ability to withstand and respond to disruptive change. And in natural systems, it's all about change. Where our best assumptions for how we typically design, our best assumptions have typically come from, well, how things have been in the past. And we know that the past is not going to be like the future. We don't really know what it's going to be like. And we are learning very quickly that it's changing faster, in bigger ways, in more unexpected ways than we could have imagined. So how does nature respond to this? And what happens if you have too much change, and what are some of the ecological principles that we can borrow to understand how to improve our adaptive capacity? So there's lots of different definitions that people are using for resilience out there. This is one I like, the capacity of whether it's individuals, organizations, communities, to survive and thrive in the face of stressors and shocks. And I choose these words, stressors and shocks, carefully. Shocks are the things that get headlines. They're the things that we know about. These are things, some of them are really endemic to our ecosystem. And our program right now is really focusing on Southern California, because a lot of the conversations about resilience are happening on the East Coast and out of Louisiana and out of New York, these places that have understandably experienced huge disruptive events. Katrina and Sandy were hugely impactful and woke us up to this changing world. But the way that things are changing and the way that that's going to be experienced in Southern California doesn't look like it does there. It doesn't mean we should be moving all our mechanical systems to the roof to deal with flooding. We have some different issues here, and some of them are not new issues. fire in California, well, this is a problem every year. I used to give a lecture every year on place-based design in September, and I would just have all these slides of fire, and I would say either, it's fire season now, or it will be fire season, and I would always feel very prophetic because I never had to really change my slides. It was just, it's always fire season. We have a fire season. That's part of our ecosystem. Understanding that, respecting that, and understanding how nature responds to that is actually a really important toolkit and a really important piece to understand about our ecosystem. Well, we ignore that. And first of all, it's important to note that fire season used to be about maybe 50 days, and now it's pretty much all the time. We always have fire season. Our conditions have changed so much that notion of fire season has really been blown up a little bit. So we do a few things that are not particularly resilient. We build and we push that urban edge out ever further into fire-based natural ecosystems. We also don't think about our water in any kind of resilient way. So everything we think about water and every way that we manage water in Southern California is insane. So a lot of what we have to do now about resilience is to just be not dumb. Sorry, but water falls here and we treat it like waste. We shoot it out to the ocean as quickly as we can, and then we take water from everywhere else we can find it and suck it up and let everyone else deal with the problems of the drought. So rethinking our infrastructure is critical, and this relates to fire. Somebody was recently telling me they were doing a mapping project looking at secondary water sources across the city of LA, and huge swaths of the city have no secondary water source. So you get to the third kind of stressor and you have an earthquake and we lose the California aqueduct, and our primary water source is the California aqueduct or one of the other aqueducts in the system, and there's no secondary water source. Well, what happens when you have power lines going down and earthquakes and all kinds of things like that? What happened in San Francisco? You have fires. And without a secondary water source, without a local water source, we're in big trouble. And some of these things don't require any kind of disruption at all. The fourth slide there with the water shooting in the air, that just happened. That's a broken water main. Our infrastructure is crumbling. We're already not in a resilient condition because we are creating systems that don't follow ecological principles. They look at serving one function at a time with one set of elements that's completely centralized and singular, sort of the opposite of resilience. So all of these things are going on in a context of ongoing stressors, everything from poor air quality, unemployment, income inequality, crumbling infrastructure, chronic health problems associated with poor air quality and environmental pollution, and ongoing disparity and racial inequality are the context. That's the daily, everyday situation that we're dealing with. And it's really important when we talk about resilience that we're not just talking about the resilience of affluent people in affluent places who have the resources to respond. We think of this as being a first world nation. We often don't behave that way. And so we need to think about how we're all connected. And there are ecological principles that underlie all of this, whether we're thinking about it literally or as a metaphor. The importance of being connected, the importance of every function being served by multiple elements and every element serving multiple functions. For those of you who have studied permaculture out here, that's straight permaculture lingo. I'll make a little plug. If you are interested in this field and want to go deep, the 2-week course or whatever course in permaculture design is one of the most important things in all my schooling that I've done. So what we're doing is taking a systems-based approach, an ecosystem. What is the ecosystem of the urban environment? And connecting it all together and understanding it through an integrative and iterative process, bringing the pieces together to solve multiple problems, to achieve multiple goals. We cannot solve all of our problems one at a time. We simply do not have the resources, and it doesn't work. The LA River is a perfect example of this. LA River is a really good solution to urban flooding. It's not a really good solution to anything else. So making sure that in the design process, we are explicit as possible of everything we're trying to achieve, and making every strategy that we implement go as far as it can, so that it slices and dices and, whatever for $9.99, because that's all we have. So this is really, the principle that we're trying to bring to the table, and to kind of create a user's manual and an operations guide for how do you do this in ways that actually meet, that support business continuity, that help you if there's a disruption, that you can not only get your function of your business working sooner and have less cost of repairs, whatever it is, but also get your employees back, make sure that people are healthier, and really try and create, leverage every piece that we're doing, every strategy that we're implementing in the built environment and in the social environment and in business processes all together. So it's a tall order. So what does it look like? This is a case study project. I was telling somebody about it earlier and mentioned that I've never fallen in love with a project the way that I love this project. It's really exciting. There's this organization called SCOPE. It's an acronym for something I can't remember, and they can't either. But I mean, it's strategic concepts in organizing and policy education. There, I got it. But the truth is, these are amazing people who are on the streets in the community doing really transformative work. This is an organization that was born out of the 92 civil unrest. Other people call them riots. After the Rodney King beating. They're housed in a former fire station that was built in the 1930s, basically right by the intersection of Florence and Normandy. So those of you who are familiar and remember those days after the riots, that's the center of it. Excuse me. So this organization has been out there building community, building social capacity, building social cohesion, building opportunity around all of the green and other kinds of initiatives that are happening. They understand the social side of sustainability that I would argue a lot of us in the green building community haven't really delved deep into in the way that we should, and we don't have the skill sets yet to really bring that piece to the table. But when you bring that integrated system together, the opportunities really open up. So this project will include, it's based on an ongoing community engagement process. This organization has over 500 active members who they've trained to advocate on their own behalf and also to participate in the workforce where they maybe couldn't before. And as well as a calling base within the community of 50,000 people that they call and actually ask them, what do you think about climate change? How do you interact with it? What does that mean to you? What does that mean in terms of jobs? And really can use that to inform policy. We are, at the USGBC-LA, are partnering with SCOPE to try and bring some of that capacity and tools and knowledge to our programs, and at the same time assist them in transforming this building as the epicenter of a Green the Block program and create a neighborhood resilience hub. So that the building itself will be rehabbed. It will include job training center and small business incubation around opportunities in green and resilience more broadly, jobs in-house. It will be a community center where people can come and connect because, by the way, when there is a disaster, it's not just how strong is your environment in order to withstand, how big is your fortress. Actually, fortresses don't do all that well in disasters. It's especially as we learn in Southern California. If we look at what really thrives here, you have to be able to be nimble and flexible. This is a highly dynamic natural environment. So being dynamic is part of the game. Knowing that the people, the communities, the organizations that do best after a disaster are those where people know each other, where neighbors already know who's going to be vulnerable, who's isolated, who's going to need extra help, who can provide help, who are the EMTs, who knows CPR, who's got a whatever tool that I can borrow. Having those connections and having an experience of working together is one of the most important things that influences recovery. So building that social cohesion is part of the resilience process. Building those relationships is part of it, as we are building the capacity for jobs to address the underlying stressors, as we are building the know-how to transform our built environment to behave in a more resilient way. So all of those things are happening together, and this center will also then serve as an emergency center, an emergency cooling center, because we know we're going to have a lot more heat waves, and people in these communities, low-income communities of color, are particularly vulnerable. Even if they have air conditioning, they may not be able to run them because they may not be able to afford it. So cooling centers are particularly important. Information centers where maybe you can even charge your cell phone to get information when the power is out. Really thinking all these things through, and also thinking through how does this building work if there's no power. So we can talk about building performance, and that's great. But if everything's relying on these very highly efficient pumps that require ongoing energy, and the energy and the grid goes down, what do you do? So this is what we're really trying to build out and explore here, and then from there create a guidebook for facilities to actually bring this into their processes. So it can look like all kinds of things. It can look like advanced technology to put in solar systems that not only provide energy but actually can be islanded and provide backup power in an emergency situation when the grid is down. But it might also look like a block party where you're actually building the relationships between people. And by the way, can you combine those? Can you install your solar system and bring in people who are doing a job training program, and then show people and bring them together and invite the neighbors, and et cetera, et cetera. So as I mentioned, we're building this guide. We'll launch it at Greenbuild. You can go on a tour of the scope project at Greenbuild and also before. And really gaining momentum and gaining partners. We really welcome participation, and if you want to know more, we would love to have you involved. And really what we're ultimately trying to do is understand the ecosystem that we live in, the way that we're changing that ecosystem over time at the local building site level, and how we can better be connected and roll with it in a way that not only makes lives safer, not only will enable us to recover faster and better from, but also will make life better today. So thanks.
Thank you, Nicole and Heather. It is my pleasure to introduce our last panel of the day, where our speakers will talk about scale and best practices for architects. And I know we have a lot of architects and designers in the room today, so this will be a great topic and really relevant to your work. Please welcome our first speaker, Chris Garvin, a managing partner at Terrapin Bright Green. Chris is joining us today from New York. And in addition to his work at Terrapin Bright Green, Chris is actively involved in Cook Fox Architects, where he is a senior associate and advises several organizations on sustainability issues, including the National Building Museum and the New York Academy of Sciences. We also have Jamie Dwyer, who is a principal at Biomimicry 3.8 and joins us today from Helena, Montana. Jamie is also a biologist at the design table and has a background in architecture, which allow her to bring her hard science background to design strategies. So with that, please welcome our two speakers as they discuss scale and best practices for architects. And please also stick around for after this presentation, where we will bring all of our speakers back up onto the stage for a Q&A. Thank you.
Ruining the flow. We'll go back. No.
Oh, you got to go first? Okay. Let me.
I did it. We're there.
Oh, you got it. Oh, good. Okay, great.
Okay, so I am Jamie Dwyer. I am a principal at Biomimicry 3.8. Biomimicry 3.8 is a biomimicry consulting firm. We also work in biomimicry professional training. And our professional training took a gigantic leap this last year when the Biomimicry Center opened in Arizona State University. The Biomimicry Center now houses all of our biomimicry professional training. It's now a Master's of Science in Biomimicry that you can do at Arizona State University, all online. So the Biomimicry Center is a joint venture between Biomimicry 3.8 and Arizona State University that also, besides the training, also supports the biomimicry research. Biomimicry 3.8 also does innovation services, meaning that we bring biology to the design table and bringing nature's strategies to be solutions for built environment and any other sort of challenge. And this picture might look like it's part of a workshop, but this is also part of how we do our consulting, because it really is getting out into nature and making those observations and then bringing those strategies that we see in nature to design. So today I want to talk about 3 approaches for biomimicry in the built environment. The first one I want to mention is the mindset. And that really is about nature being a solution set, being something that guidelines and just bringing that whole attitude to design. It's something different than the way that we usually work in design. Because, of course, as humans, we are part of nature. We are part of this big system. And living in the same place and dealing with the same challenges. So, of course, on Earth, we all are on Earth together as a big system, but, we are doing the same challenges. We're trying to do the same thing that all of these creatures around us are doing. And the patterns of what all of these creatures around us are doing, because, of course, the creatures that are alive now are totally honed to this place that we now call Earth and this context that we have now. And what are all of these creatures doing? What do they have in common? Those big patterns are life's principles. And they are all working towards creating conditions conducive to life. And so this is our chance to then proactively bring that to our designs as well. So biomimicry as a mindset, really another benefit is that the visions and values and identity and really just the alignment that the team can have focused around biomimicry and just that thinking. The second aspect I want to talk about is biomimicry as a reference. So this is what people think of when they say doing biomimicry, so bringing that genius of nature to design. And biomimicry is the conscious emulation of nature's genius, and that can be form. Colin talked about the opening and closing of the pine cone, but it could also be the spiral, how all of those little bits package up so nicely in the spiral and learning from that at a level of form. Or the spiral also can be the bulk help, so like the Pax fan. So that's all about the spiral and how water moves by that in a way that reduces drag. Biomimicry can also be inspiration at the level of process. So this illustration here is photosynthesis, energy from sunlight, so how plants get energy from sunlight, and how can we learn from that and bring that elegant process to our own process and make photovoltaics in a more effective, efficient way. Biomimicry can also be looked at the level of a system. So this is a food web. How do all of these parts and pieces that are interconnected work together and interact with each other? So how do all of these things that live in the ocean, how are they cleaning the water? How are they creating soil? How are they moving nutrients through a system? How are they, there is no waste. So how is the output of one becoming the resource of another, and how can we learn from that? So biomimicry at this reference level, really nature is becoming a solution set for us, because the sustainable world already exists around us, and we can look at these examples and learn from them. I want to talk, there are a few students here, I think 3 I saw in person from the Arizona State Master's Program that came to attend, which is very cool, and I'm actually helping to grade some of their work. I don't know why I took that on. And I know, I see Amanda and she's like, oh, why would you do that? And so, but I want to mention the assignment that they did that I graded last week, which I thought was awesome. So the assignment was, well, the week's content was to learn about ecosystem succession. So basically, if you have a disturbance or whatever, a glacier recedes and there's bare rock, what happens between bare rock and a mature ecosystem that will be the climax system that survives there for long term? So learning about that, so learning what are the terms, what are the characteristics, and how do you identify one versus the other, and just learning about that. And then the assignment was to identify an industrial system and identify whether, like, learn about it and assess where it is and identify where it is on this continuum from an immature system to a mature system. And of course, they looked at our food system, they looked at all of these different industries and technology, and all of our systems that they identified, they match with an immature system. So all of our systems are acting as if they're immature ecosystems. And so we have all of this to learn from an individual level of how one species does, thermoregulation, but all the way to the level of how does an ecosystem function and how can we learn from that? So biomimicry, as a reference, what that really is in the doing aspect, that is moving between biology and design, translating between those and bridging between those two things. The next couple of slides are an example from a project I worked on that was all about learning from local genius. And yes, as humans, we have great ideas and we know about countercurrent heat exchange and all of these different things, but it was really adding the lens of local genius to what we already know in these different systems. So countercurrent heat exchange, but then what does that look like through the lens of a kangaroo rat? Or what does that look like with the genius of a bumblebee or with a beaver? All of these creatures that, the beaver has it does countercurrent heat exchange in its cooling through its tail, but it has a bypass valve. And so if it doesn't want to do countercurrent heat exchange, it doesn't have to. And so this is in this creature's body, and this is a more elegant and complicated solution than many of our cooling and heating systems, which is really cool. The third thing I want to talk about is biomimicry at the level of metrics. So the metrics are really looking at this year what we're looking at is the metrics of how ecosystems are functioning. And Janine puts it, when the forest and the city are functionally indistinguishable, then we know we have reached sustainability. So these systems around us are doing these amazing things, moderating weather extremes and their impacts, purifying the air and water, pollinating crops and all of the other foods that we eat. And so this isn't even a whole list, but an ecosystem is doing these things almost as a byproduct of just their individual interactions with each other. So that picture of the food web, all of those different creatures, they are just trying to live, but as a byproduct of what they are all doing, then these are the benefits, that the function that comes out of what they're doing. And as humans, we refer to this list as ecosystem services. But from an ecosystem perspective, this is just the general functionality and the functioning of the output of this area of all of these creatures living and surviving and interacting together. So we have individual things. There are trees, and they are sequestering carbon. And there's different species that are pollinators, but then as they all interact together, you get these more complicated outputs like erosion control. You have nematodes and you have worms, and they are decomposers, but the act of all of these decomposers together, then suddenly you have nutrient cycling. And so it's just this complex way that a system is working together that we can mimic. But how, it's one thing to say how, but then what are the metrics behind this? So this is an aerial shot of Missoula, which is where one of the Biomimicry 3.8 offices is. So we have this system, and there's, it's in the foothills, and it's a riparian area. How should this area be functioning? How much carbon should it be sequestering? How much soil should it be making a year? How much water should it be cleaning? How does this area manage flooding? How does this area manage nutrient cycling? How is waste recycled in this type of an area? And then our company is starting to work with ecological performance standards. So looking at a reference habitat, like a whole and healthy system that represents a foothills or a riparian area, and figuring out what are the metrics, how much carbon should we be sequestering in this particular area in Montana, and then that really can become goals that this region should have in order to function as this ecosystem should be functioning. And so then, of course, every project that happens within this umbrella of Missoula, Montana knows that, in order for Missoula to be functioning as it should be functioning, these are the goals that we should strive for. And it's very, very important that we do that, really. These are stats from a project that we worked on in India where, a lot of times in sustainability, in India, let's start with this. So they're building new cities in India. And this new city that was being built, they thought that the best thing that they could do was to collect all of the water and use it and then put it back into the water table, whatever their plans might be. But in looking at how this ecosystem should function, we learned that 20 to 30% of the rainfall should actually go back up into the sky through either evaporation or transpiration. And if it doesn't, it actually changes the climate of that area because the humidity, so this is India and there's monsoon rains, which is where they get a majority of their water for the entire year. And so in precipitation. And so if the monsoon rainstorm is coming and the air is dry, it loses its momentum and it runs out of steam and it doesn't go very far inland. But if the air conditions are proper and if all of the conditions are as they should be, then the monsoon storm comes in further. And so you can see how something like that, it's a complicated system, but all of these details need to be in place in order for the rain to keep coming in that far inland. So it is important that they stick that way. And Mikhail didn't mention this, but Interface is also one of the first pilot projects on thinking about EPS, the Ecological Performance Standards. And I just wanted to say that I'm not going to talk about it, but there is a pilot project going on, and Interface is looking at how might ecosystem services be renewed at an Interface factory. So this kind of thinking is very new and leading edge, but it is out there, and companies and places, cities even, are starting to look at this scale of how they can mimic nature at this large ecosystems level. And that's all I got. And then close your eyes really quick, and Chris is going to talk about you? Okay.
We coordinate our presentations, so I wouldn't say certain things because Jamie was saying them, so it really made sense that she needed to go first. So thanks for bearing with us. It's great to be here and see so many familiar faces and to reconnect with so many good friends in the community and to meet all of you, everyone else that is new to me. I'm Chris Garvin at Terrapin Bright Green. We're a New York City-based sustainability consulting firm. And we focus on biosolic design, which was mentioned by Nicole and Amanda earlier. And then we also touch on the things that Jamie was just mentioning, looking at ecological design for communities and cities and biomimetic innovation. And so I'll focus on those two today and just really provide some case studies that sort of builds off of the comments that Jamie made and others earlier today. The building in the background is 111 8th Avenue in New York City's Chelsea neighborhood. Google bought this building several years ago, and it's their New York City headquarters. And working with them and HLW Architects, we helped develop a master planning effort around sustainability and then some infrastructure upgrade projects I'm going to talk about. So the little red box on the right is where 111 8th Avenue is in New York City in Manhattan. And the image on the left is from an effort called Manhattan. So it was the remapping of the original ecosystems of Manhattan Island, sort of before European settlement is the baseline time frame. And so from that, Eric Sanderson learned amazing things about what it was like before Europeans built the stuff on the other side of the image. And we used that ecological history to really sort of start asking some very fundamental questions about this very urban building and this very urban site. It's an oak tulip forest. It was very vibrant, very diverse. We actually identified some springs on the site or near the site that actually informed some really interesting projects. But we also developed ecological performance standards for the sustainability plan. So we created these aspirational goals like 4 tons of carbon sequestration per year for a 2 million square foot, 16-story building that is this equal volume as the Empire State Building, just kind of condensed on its side. It's a massive full block building in New York. But that's an aspirational goal that they'll be working on for the next 20 years, along with other sort of water goals and productivity goals and so forth. And as part of that, it sort of really makes you think differently about the solution sets that you start coming up with. So the building uses a lot of water, potable water for mechanical systems, cooling systems, and one of the goals was to address this issue. And when we looked at all the water moving through the building, we also identified that there was a lot of water from the ground coming into the building. And that actually is those underground springs. So we have the water tested, we have the water metered. It's somewhere in the range of 40 to 50 million gallons of water a year is moving through the basement wall and being pumped directly into the sewer system. So it impacts sewage overflows and combined sewer impacts the river system. It also is just wasted, pretty high quality water. Can't drink it because it's coming from the ground, but we can use it for a lot of other things. So we proposed a very aggressive 10-year plan to look at dramatically dropping the water consumed from the potable water system, which is great in New York. We have a ton of water. Climate change is going to give us more water, so it's not really a issue like it is here in Southern California, but we still want to protect that resource. So thinking about how we recycle water within the building for mechanical systems and for toilet use and so forth. And like this is a very sort of architecture kind of engineering idea. So this isn't like, anything that innovative. But it was exciting that the client took it on, and they now harvest about 5 million gallons of that spring water, and it's used in the cooling towers currently. And as they scale up some of the central systems, that'll be expanded in line with that system. But what also, when you start working with biomimicry, you start thinking about these larger systems. You sort of go beyond the normal boundaries of conversation, and then you start really getting into interesting conversations. So the sphere in the center of the slide represents 5 million gallons of rainfall that falls on this building every year. So that's that traditional, harvest your rainwater and recycle it and reuse it. The sphere on the left represents the 50 plus or minus million gallons of water that's used by the building on a given year. The circle on the right is around 200 million gallons, and that's the water that is consumed at the power plant to produce the electricity that the building uses on an annual basis. And if you can imagine a sphere the size of the wall behind me, that would represent the amount of water consumed by the food that's eaten in the building in a given year. So if you care about water efficiency and you're trying to convince your client, like they have got $10 million, they want to do something really amazing with water, they want to be really proud that they were smart, you can convince them to do gray water catchment and recycling, and it'll probably cost $1 million. And you're going to save some. You're going to like really shrink down, that 50 million gallons. You could do some really cool, like we're replacing all the windows with these really cool windows that are more than $10 million. But it's going to shrink down that 200 million gallon sphere of water consumed electrical plant. Or you could just do meatless Mondays. Kind of no cost, and it's more water that can be saved at all in the spheres on this slide. So it fundamentally changes the conversation with the client. You tend to look kind of smart when you bring this stuff up. And it really gets them thinking differently about the systems in which they're interacting. Because like most companies, the architecture team doesn't talk to the food services team. They're told how to build the kitchens. But it does start to change that conversation. You have richer conversations, and you then start talking about educating the staff about, the impact of food and where the food is coming from and what does that really mean. What's the food waste and where is that going? So it's a richer conversation that I think biomimicry and biophilia really provide to the conversation and having real impact faster. The second project I want to talk about is in Buffalo, New York, an old Rust Belt city in western New York State. It is having a renaissance, and it's posted population growth for the first time in 30 years. And it's a phenomenon happening in the Rust Belt right now, so it's really fascinating. If you're from there, you visit there. There's a lot of exciting things happening in Cleveland, Ohio, and Buffalo, and places you probably have never thought to visit, here in Pasadena. But in Buffalo, we worked with the Buffalo Niagara Riverkeeper at the watershed level. So again, thinking about the system, the watershed system, and how water is moving through this region and what that means. So for the Metal Campus, which is in downtown Buffalo, we looked at green building strategies and how they connect to ecosystem services so that we can start helping them understand, when we're talking about a landscape master plan for a campus, how do we choose strategies that are helping us understand how to regulate water flow? Or if we're thinking, if we want to justify green roofs, how can we think about those and the framework of ecosystem services and how that can feed back into the decision-making of the plant types, the soil depth of that green roof, and how we move that forward for addressing biodiversity of the region or the recreational needs of the community. So this idea of starting to tie together sort of our traditional green building practices and then these larger ecological concepts of ecosystem services and how we start realigning our thinking toward that larger system that we need for all the, food provisioning and good air quality and recreational resources that we depend on from nature. And then stepping all the way out from, going from the city all the way to the watershed and thinking about what, this region is starting to grow again. It's trying to plan for its future. So it has demographic changes occurring, it has land use changes occurring, and it has climate change impacts. So how are those dynamic elements playing out within the watershed, and how can the community support and reinforce these ecosystem services to ensure that they have a healthy, prosperous future in this region? And so the Buffalo Niagara Riverkeeper and Terrapin have been working on understanding what that means for the different major industries of the region and how the manufacturing facilities for PV, there's a new PV plant going in here, how that plant can actually support ecosystem services, how the agricultural community can be planning for increased growing days, how they're going to start adding new different types of foods that are going to be growing because they have longer growing seasons. They're going to have more water, less frost. And so how do they sort of plan for this, and what does that mean for the city itself and for the region from both an economic, a social, and an environmental perspective? So for instance, there are natural hydrological cycles that occur in nature. The image on the left is a headland forest that is being preserved and studied, and it's fairly intact currently, and so it's trying to be protected so that it can support all of the downstream resources that everyone is depending on, even though they don't understand necessarily the connection between these two very different places, downtown Buffalo and the Headlands. And then on the right is, in the background is an image of the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus, which is one of the large economic drivers of the city. And it has water demands, and there's a sewer system that's provided and a potable water system that's provided, and those systems have current problems. And then when we look at these temporal changes of putting 2 million more square feet of buildings on this site as they build a new campus or expand the campus, looking at the climate change stressors and pulses that are expected in this region, it exacerbates some of the current challenges and it creates new challenges that could be catastrophic. And so how do we start planning for those as we try to map out potential scenarios? What kind of strategies can we build into the place now, into the building systems, into the community itself, into the landscaping design, into the infrastructure? And so jumping scales down to the termite, I kind of love the fact that termites for like a theme, which is not normal for biomimicry conversations, I promise. This is pretty cool that for some reason the termites are one of the fans today. So this is a termite mound from East Africa, and that sort of wavy thing inside is a fungal comb. And we've been working with some researchers out of New York State on looking at humidity control devices for buildings based on how this fungal comb manages moisture inside a termite mound. So for that fungal comb actually digests cellulose for the termites to have nutrition. And so the termites bring cellulose to the fungal comb. The fungal comb sort of breaks it down, and then the termites actually eat from that fungal comb. So they have this symbiotic relationship within the termite mound, and for that fungal comb to thrive, very tight environmental conditions are needed from temperature and humidity perspective. And so it's able to keep the humidity within this termite mound in like the hot desert of East Africa within 2 percentage points, which we have no technical system that can do that in a building. But this fungal comb can. In a place where there's 30-degree diurnal changes, there are droughts for months, or there are deluges outside. And for the most part, the fungal comb does all the work on managing humidity. And so we've been doing tests on how to mimic this fungal comb using clays and cellulose fibers, and then looking at the form and the structure that this fungal comb uses to manage moisture. And so this image in the bottom is a gyroid shape that we're looking at as a model for a sort of scaled filter that would actually remove humidity from the airstream as it enters a building to reduce conditioning needs in humid climates. And as we know, it's going to be a hotter world in the future, which also means it's going to be a more humid world as the oceans warm. And so humidity controls will become a growing issue for most urban environments. So that's just one sort of product scale building product effort that we're doing. And then along with our 14 patterns, we also have a publication called Tapping into Nature, which looks at over 100 innovations that are at some part, some portion of the innovation cycle to change our world, looking at nature as its inspiration. So you can go to our website and find that and the other publications freely available. And you can, I'm supposed to always say sign up for our newsletter. I get in trouble for not saying that, so I'm saying it this time. And I guess now everyone can come back up. All the speakers can come up, and we're going to have Q&A. So, excellent. Can we leave that? We'll just leave that. Yeah.
So we're a little bit over time. We're going to do Q&A for about 10 minutes or so. And then, feel free to come up after that as well to speak with the speakers. I guess get the slides advanced here. So we're going to pull these black chairs up as well. Or it's only going to be 10 minutes. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And there's handheld mics. Flip this on. Okay, great.
And for this last section, I'd like to invite anyone with questions to take them to the stand mic in the back. We'd love to hear from you guys. Or we can get started with, how can biophilia and biomimicry be used as guiding principles to make the Los Angeles region more resilient?
That sounds like a good one for Heather. Here you go.
A lot of thoughts on that. Yeah. I think yeah, we are writing a guide that does exactly that. And I think part of it is understanding what we were saying about water and looking at how our natural systems deal with water. And so that's the first thing. Let me pause, because that's a really, did I write that question? Because that's insane. I think starting with understanding the place where we are, understanding that this is not New York, this is not Louisiana, this is not one of the other places where the resilience conversation is happening, and that we have really great ideas here. There's really amazing, I'm looking around the room and seeing so many people that I know that have deep understanding of this place, and understanding, first of all, that this is a place. It's an important place. It's a beautiful place. It has its own natural processes, and trying to understand what they are and really understand the dynamic nature of our landscape to begin with. That is about earthquakes and fire and flood to begin with as a cycle, and how those things work, and try and emulate and embrace those processes and prepare for and embrace change. This region is about change. How do we embrace it and hold on to what's important and work together to, yeah, that's a hard question.
I like to add to that something that actually you spoke about, the social aspect. I think we are superorganism is another definition that is not properly scientific as biophilia, but is coined by the same scientist, Jo Wilson. And I think, you know, the sum of the parts is greater than the parts itself, this wholeness. And so it's starting to act as a group, social insects, and not as individuals only. I think our individual presence and work is very important, but also work in a system. There are so many resources in Southern California, from great scientific institution to cultural, so working together is really something that would enhance greatly our environment.
I'll throw in Meatless Mondays.
Done.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions? Oh,
yeah. I'm Sarika. I'm a high school junior, and I was wondering, what can you guys do to bring awareness of biomimicry to high schools?
Yeah, so connected with so Biomimicry 3.8 is the consulting side, but our sister organization is the Biomimicry Institute, and they handle more of the K through 12 education, and so there are definitely resources on their site for college and high school age students. And as well, I think there are also some resources online like Ask Nature that any designer can look to. But as far as content for K through 12 in particular, our work is done through Biomimicry Institute for that age group. And there's the Biomimicry Design Challenge that is hosted through the Biomimicry Institute. That is a design challenge. I think it was a 2-year one, but now it's going to be another 1-year challenge, I think, that anyone can apply and submit a design to. And it's a global design issue that they handle.
I might add to that. Hello again. I think, so we've had some conversations just kind of begun. I think it's partly from the Biomimicry LA standpoint, we're looking to aggregate a bunch of people that have interest in this and just get them around, not a design table, but an education table, and figure out where some of these resources might come from, where some of this curricula might come from. And again, as Jamie said, the Institute has a lot of fantastic curricula, K-12. We could also work with groups like the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, has some great educational resources there. The San Diego Zoo has offered to serve up some of their curricula, and then if we can take and create new phenotypes, if you will, and bring it back to them and kind of have these cycles of use would be good. But I think what we want to do here locally is there are some educators, I know of a group at Thousand Oaks, for example, that are bringing workshops into schools that, you know, they're doing it very independently. So we really just need to bring some people to the table and see what everybody's doing and kind of, you know, gather together, and I think that would be the next step, at least from where we sit.
I may be signing myself up for something that I don't have time for or commit to, but I've given presentations in schools during like career fairs type of thing. It's you know, it's pretty easy to come in and talk to students about your experiences, and they get really excited about pathways that they can go in life. I've had schools contact me from outside of Portland, and I simply set up an Adobe Connect, a GoToMeeting, and do a video conference with them, and I show them a lot of just great images of nature and talk about biomimicry, biophilia, the roots of where my passions come from, and then ask them to express their experiences in nature, and that opens up a whole new world. So I'm happy to give a presentation. I think either via video conference or in person, it can be done pretty easily.
I think one thing I just really want to remind everyone is how important experience with nature is to so many of the speakers who came up here and talked about it, and that not every child has the opportunity to have that kind of access. And so first of all, making sure that the children in your lives get out into nature, but second of all, identifying programs for at-risk youth to get out in nature and providing scholarships and support for those programs. They're really easy to forget about. What is that? That's like this thing over here. That's actually hugely important to expand the environmental movement, to make in the environmental movement you know, relevant and be informed by broader experiences and broader diversity, and by people who actually are bearing the burden of environmental impacts. So finding any program that it provides quality experiences for at-risk youth to be out in nature, I think is hugely, hugely important.
We also do a lot of grant research at Gensler. So currently, actually, we're doing a grant on biophilia design and return on investment with actually Terrapin and with also Interface. So we welcome you to come over, and actually happy to host that.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Kyle Pickett. I'm managing principal for Urban Fabric. It's a sustainability consulting and communications practice in San Francisco. My background is biochemistry, so the languages that you are speaking really resonate with me on a fundamental level in my training. Also grew up in the Pacific Northwest, but I also was raised in a very conservative Christian home, and there's nothing wrong with that. But some of the conversations that we're having with developers actually on a fundamental level is that man shall have dominion over the earth. And some of the conversations that I'm starting to have with these developers is kind of educating them to the extent that stewardship is really a fundamental quality within all of the world's major religions. And I don't know if that's a conversation that you guys have very often. I mean, from a consulting perspective, talking with some of these developers, it can be like I may as well just break my head up against a brick wall. But being able to communicate with them on a stewardship level has been really valuable in moving that needle and moving that conversation forward, that it's not about domination or dominion, it's really about stewardship. And it's not so much a question to the group, but it is a conversation that I have coming up, not so much in the Bay Area, but with some of the other developers that we work with. And I just thought if maybe you had some thoughts or comments around that.
I can take a crack at that. So as I said, I work for a Georgia-based company, so we have plenty of evangelical Christians, and a lot of them are our most zealous sustainability advocates. And you have to leave room for people to understand this in their own ways. Now, I think in the case of developers, it's very convenient to interpret sacred text to support your own profit motive. Because we have a preacher who runs one of our recycling lines who says that that word dominion is actually translated properly as stewardship. So, you know, very tricky.
It's ancient Greek, oikiyama or something like that, but yeah.
But yeah, so it's, you know, really important distinction in terms of, you know, that is actually a core and even a strength within our Georgia-based operation. You know, these people who have incorporated our sustainability mission into their own personal spirituality. So it doesn't have to go that way. And like I said, I think some of it is a sort of false claim to the spiritual text supporting your own profit motive. But I think you really have to be open to people finding their own connection to biomimicry, sustainability. If you want to say that these, you know, marvelous creatures were divinely created, great. Let's talk about, you know, let's mimic the best designer of all. I'm fine with that. I don't know the real answer. But so, I mean, that's what I would say to that, is we have to be open to these things, but we also have to have people actually having an authentic spiritual, you know, dialogue as opposed to something that is just kind of convenient.
We've actually worked with evangelical churches, and you get in these conversations about, you know, do we spend the money to make our church greener, or do we spend the money digging wells for villages in Africa? And so they're both really important things. And if you're a missionary-based evangelical church, the well seems like the thing to do. But you get into this conversation where they, you know, it has to be open. I think Mikhail said a great, you know, you have to find your own way to these ideas and to the passion that lies within you. But I think it's very possible, and I mean, I think the Pope is doing a great job connecting spirituality and addressing climate change, and we should applaud that work. And I think, you know, even developers get it, especially when, you know, we have a lot of developers who build a lot in New York, and so they see New York as something they have to protect because they own a fair amount of it, honestly. And so they see themselves as stewards of the city because they're part of it. And so that's also part of that story. It's how them see they're part of that urban environment, and they're also part of that natural environment. And those two pieces need each other in order to be their best. But I think people get it. You do have to spend that time to educate them, engage them, and listen to their fears, and then help them understand how to move beyond those fears.
And I want to add to that. So, I think biomimicry is actually a great tool to address that and open that door, because the way that Biomimicry 3.8, and I think all of the people here who practice biomimicry as well, think about biomimicry as more than just this tool of, it's not just the emulate part of biomimicry, the case study part. It's this sort of three-legged stool of there's emulate, but then there's also ethos, and then there's also reconnect. And so you can enter biomimicry through any of those. So a lot of clients will come to us and say, well, we want a more effective widget, which is fine, and they have no interest in hearing anything about sustainability. But then when they learn what biomimicry truly is and that there are these three aspects, then they come away at the end with a whole different respect and a whole different thinking for that reconnect and for that ethos of their system and their relationship with nature.
Yeah, I think this is exactly why the relationship between people and nature and the key components of biophilia and biophilic design are so important, because you'll never cherish what you don't love, and you'll never steward what you don't care for. And the more people are immersed in nature or have built environments that heal that relationship with nature, I think the more we'll want to be stewards.
And we've also done a lot of work with Native nations and Pima Maricopa Indians. So on that spiritual level, on that side, actually the Gila River actually has the highest case of diabetes with all Native nations, and actually because we've changed their water systems. So I think, you know, for them, so many of their young people are moving away from the reservation and bringing that back, and bringing that education aspect of it back, and that connection to nature, and making innovative, you know, developments that really, you know, thrive their communities is important.
So we are almost at 12:40, and the workshop starts at 1. I want to make sure people have a chance to eat if they're going to do the workshop. Let's do one more question, and then we'll then feel free to come up if you have any other questions.
Thanks, Drew, for letting me have my one question. So, Will Vicente from SoCal Edison. So, first of all, thank you to everybody, all the presenters. The presentations and the words have been really inspiring for, I think, a lot of us. It's really unique to have this sort of presentation in Southern California, and I think this movement is really gaining a lot of momentum, so I appreciate everybody for doing that. One of the common themes that I hear in a lot of the presentations is indirectly is awareness, and getting people aware of the circumstances that provide their lifestyle, where your energy comes from, where your water comes from, what are the raw materials that make your building. My question to everybody, given your experience, is how do we drive that message home to scale? Is it at a personal level? Does everybody individually, are they responsible for knowing all of that information, managing it, and addressing it? Or do we look at a community scale, city scale? What is your sense of what the right scale is to really keep the momentum going with sustainability?
I'll take the first crack and sort of group answer this, but I think we have to throw open many doors. People ultimately have to have a choice and have to have many opportunities to raise their own awareness, but ultimately that's their choice. And so I think, we have plenty of people who buy our product and they think it's pretty, and only later on when they've fallen in love with it because of aesthetic reasons or how useful it is, do they check into the backstory and be like, oh, this is made from 80% recycled content and fishnets and stuff, and then that becomes a door to which they can enter into this greater awareness of where does our stuff come from, what impact does it have that I don't see. But we have to, we can't count on people to just do the right thing just because. We have to draw them in. We have to entice them. We have to give them the many opportunities to think in new ways and not expect them to come to us. And so I think, it behooves us to find ways to make this appealing. I think it's part of why biomimicry is so great. It has this allure. It draws on biophilia, this sort of sometimes deeply buried instinct we have to love nature and to affiliate with it. And I think that becomes, one of my hopes for biophilic design is that it sort of seeps in, that if people are in these biophilically designed spaces and are intuitively getting that they're getting something out of contact with nature, or even things that are reminding them of nature, they're going to value nature more. We have to give something in order to get something back. So I think part of this is even subliminal, but part of it is also giving people these opportunities to choose to enter into this awareness.
I'll just add that, from a scale perspective, it also depends on what we're trying to achieve. So we all need to work better at conserving water and conserving our resources and our own consumption patterns. We need to choose better the products we consume and utilize. But we also have to engage our community leaders and our government leaders and the choices they make around how to protect our watershed so that the reservoirs are safe, or how they deal with regulation around electricity generation and renewable energy. Like, we, as an individual, I can't affect that policy, but we together can affect that policy at those state and municipal levels. So we have to work at all those levels, and we have to educate our kids because they're amazing at seeing things that as adults we forget to see. So it's everything.
I think for my research, it's more like getting out of the guilt zone and that whole idea of living without. And I think actually, a little bit in the hotel market, it's sort of like everyone wants to have an amazing shower experience, which is, not a 1.8 shower. So, and people also, when you go on a hotel experience, you're also kind of a little bit on a hall pass. So that idea of seeing that card that sits on the bed and save your towels, and it's like you kind of want to throw that towel on the floor and get a new towel because you don't have to do that. So I think it's just moving away from living without, that it's actually still an enriching experience, and kind of just moving forward with that education.
I think also to move from seeing to observing. We are very fast in everything we do, right? And so they're asking why and try to observe most of the things that are here, actually, I would argue everything comes from nature, right? So there are levels of removal through the artificiality process, but if we start to, or continue to ask why, like the kids do, then I think at many levels the conversation goes there through observing and asking. Keep curious, as Frank Gehry says.
It's a good one to end on right there. Let's get a round of applause for these speakers. I learned a ton. I'm very inspired. Thank you guys all so much for making this happen today. A reminder to please turn your surveys in on the way out at the registration table. Workshop starts at 1 p.m. with Amanda and ILFI. It's here on site as well. Check out the exhibitor tables again on the way out. Hang out, network, collaborate. Verdical Group is really happy to have put this together, and thanks again for coming out. Bye.
Great job, Franny.